Everyone's had that moment where the house makes a noise and you decide firmly there was nothing. The next few hours are all the things it could have been. Demons with names and job titles, the SCP nobody's allowed to talk about, Lovecraft's worst ideas, and the cryptids people keep reporting anyway. But don't worry, you'll be fine. Probably. Just don't turn around.
It's late at night, and you realize something's been slipping into your room for, let's call it, after-hours activities. You wake up drained, delirious, and sometimes not at all. And as bad as that sounds, it's still better than the demon who murders every husband you ever married just to keep you to himself. Or maybe that's worse. Either way, this is the disturbing demonology iceberg. Tier 1. Amon. Amon is known as the demon of life and reproduction, which sounds weirdly wholesome until you actually see what he looks like. According to multiple grimoires, including the Lesser Key of Solomon, Amon takes the form of a flaming wolf-serpent hybrid with the head of an owl and the teeth of a dog. And yes, he's the guy in charge of fertility. So if your mental image of baby-making didn't already include a fire-breathing chimera, congratulations, now it does. The Pseudomonarchia Daemonum from 1583 gives us the most detailed physical description of Amon. It keeps the whole wolf with a serpent's tail that spits fire thing, but it adds that he can also take human form when needed, though that version is just as disturbing, with an owl-like head and teeth that belong on something rabid. The book also calls him the strongest prince of all other. Amon is listed as a Grand Marquis of Hell, which basically means he's high-ranking demon royalty. He governs 40 legions of demons, which is bougie underworld speak for a lot. His resume includes knowing everything that has ever happened and things that are to come, solving fights between friends, and for some reason no one can explain, summoning the spirits of people who drowned. Why those three things go together is anyone's guess. Some sources link Amon to Amun, the Egyptian god of creation and hidden power, who is often fused with Ra as Amun-Ra, and sometimes painted blue to show his divine, untouchable nature. The connection mostly comes from their names sounding similar, but historians don't really buy it. Still, it hasn't stopped demonology texts from making the stretch. You know what they say? When in doubt, just say your demon might be loosely inspired by a major ancient deity. That'll add credibility. But here's the part that actually matters. Amon isn't just another scary-looking demon. He governs over memory, relationships, and reproduction. The literal building blocks of society are, in this cosmology, being managed by this guy. And Amon's not even an outlier. There are entire grimoires packed with demons just like him. In Tier 4, there's a demon that mated with humans and produced children. But before that, let's talk about a demon that didn't quite start out as one. Abaddon. Originally, in the Hebrew Bible, Abaddon wasn't a person or demon. It was a place, usually mentioned alongside Sheol, aka the grave, or underworld, depending on how dramatic your translator is. In instances where Abaddon is mentioned alongside Sheol, it's described as wide open, bottomless, and hungry, which kinda tracks since Abaddon means destruction in Hebrew. In Greek, it becomes Apollyon, which just means destroyer. Job, Psalms, and Proverbs all refer to it as a place that swallows everything, including wisdom, love, and fire. It's where things go when they stop being things. You can think of it as the landfill of the afterlife, except it's always expanding. In the book of Revelation, things get interesting. There's an angel mentioned that fits Abaddon's description. This angel commands an army of horse-shaped locusts with human faces, lion's teeth, women's hair, and scorpion tails. His job is to torment people who don't have God's seal on their forehead for 5 whole months. Not kill, by the way, just torment. This angel is also called the Angel of the Abyss, and according to Revelation chapter 9, verse 11, that's Abaddon in Hebrew and Apollyon in Greek. What do you think the word is in Latin? I'll give you one guess. Time's up. It's exterminans. And yes, it means exactly what it sounds like. As specific as Abaddon's job description sounds, people still can't seem to agree on who he actually is. Some say he's Satan, while others think he's the Antichrist. Then there are those who believe he's just doing God's dirty work. But the wildest theory of all comes from certain Christian groups who claim he's actually the resurrected Christ. It sounds like a reach, but Revelation is vague enough that you can kind of see how they got there. In other texts, rabbinical, apocryphal, and Mandean, Abaddon is everything from a feared underworld realm to a judge of the dead. In one Gnostic homily, he even helps create Adam, then later shows up at the resurrection, like an unwanted guest who never left the party. Asmodeus. The first thing you should know about this guy is that he really hates weddings. Asmodeus, also known as Ashmedai, is a demon with roots that go way back. He's usually depicted with 3 heads, 1 rooster leg, a snake tail, and he rides a dragon. His name is believed to come from the Zoroastrian demon of wrath, Ashma. Though the paperwork is messy, you'll hear about him in Tier 4. Over time, Asmodeus moved through Jewish, Christian, and Islamic lore, collecting titles like King of the Demons, Destroyer of Lust, and that one cursed guy in the book of Tobit who killed all the grooms. In Tobit, Asmodeus is basically Sarah's personal haunting. She's the daughter of a man named Regel and a relative of Tobit, a blind Israelite living in exile. Sarah keeps trying to get married, but every time she does, Asmodeus, who's obsessed with her, kills the husband before they can even share a bed. It happens 7 times, and by the end, people are convinced she's cursed. But then comes Tobias, Tobit's son, who happens to have God and an angel in his corner. With some help and a smoked fish liver, he manages to drive Asmodeus away. The demon gets exorcised and chained up in Egypt, and Sarah finally gets a husband who lives through the wedding night. In the Talmud, though, Asmodeus has a weird personality switch. He's still dangerous, but also kind of quirky. He drinks, jokes, and even gets tricked into building Solomon's temple. At one point, he body swaps with King Solomon and rules in his stead. Nobody notices for years, which says a lot about the job. Islamic stories borrowed that plot too. In those, he's called Sakhr, or the Rock, because after Solomon defeats him, he locks him in a stone and throws him into the sea. In one tale, travelers find him locked in a stone in the middle of the desert. The passage then goes to say he was still alive and looked very, very angry when he was found. And because no pantheon is complete without blaming a demon for desire, in Christian demonology, Asmodeus is the demon of lust. Catholic scholars says he runs all the gambling houses in hell and commands 72 legions of lesser demons. In demon ranking circles, he's a hotshot king and is second only to Lucifer. Despite his resume, Asmodeus isn't just evil. In some versions, he falls in love, and in others, he's married to Lilith. In Kabbalistic lore, he's even part human. What stays the same, though, is that wherever he shows up, something goes horribly wrong. Belial. Let's say you're reading the Old Testament and you see the words sons of Belial. That's not a compliment. It's Hebrew for worthless people. Not quirky or misguided, just completely useless. In early texts, Belial wasn't even a person. It was shorthand for moral garbage, idolaters, abusers, and people who stirred up civil war. Basically, if a scene opened with Sons of Belial, someone's getting stabbed. Eventually, Belial got a promotion. Somewhere between the Dead Sea Scrolls and early Christianity, this idea of worthlessness put on a crown, sprouted wings, and became the chief of all darkness. The Dead Sea sects made him a demon king, where he commands armies of destruction. He's the one God uses when he wants to let evil off the leash, whatever that means. Eventually, Belial becomes a full character in the war. Light versus darkness, God versus Belial. You get the point. It's also very dramatic. Belial is not just a demon though. In the Qumran text, he's actually an angel. Specifically, an angel created by God to lead forces of wickedness. The scrolls make it very clear that when the final war comes, Belial's forces, which by the way are numerous and meant to test humanity. Well, that's comforting. Over in the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, he becomes an opposing god, an actual enemy force competing with God for control of human souls. Later on in Christian literature, he's depicted as Satan Light, a slick talker and a manipulator. So pretty much a lawyer from hell who sounds smart, but smells like rot. Milton's Paradise Lost calls him charming, cowardly, and vile. Unlike other demons, Belial doesn't kick down the door, just talks you into leaving it unlocked. By the time you get to modern occult texts, Belial's gotten cozy. In the Satanic Bible, he's one of hell's 4 princes. His domain is the earth, not the sky or even fire. The normal physical world, real life, because that's where worthlessness spreads best. Beelzebub. Beelzebub, the fly guy, started off as a Beelzebub, a deity worshipped as the god of the sky in the Philistine city of Ekron. One of the earliest mentions of his name appears in the Hebrew Bible, when King Ahaziah of Israel, after being injured, sends messengers to ask Beelzebub if he'll recover. Yeah, that was a pretty big mistake. According to the text, God wasn't thrilled by this. Ahaziah had disrespected him by going to Beelzebub for answers instead of him. So he sent Elijah to meet the messengers with a message of his own. Elijah declared that as punishment for what he'd done, Ahaziah was going to die. And he did. So the earliest mention of Baal is him getting someone killed just for being associated with him. The term Baal originally just meant Lord. What follows, Zevav, meaning flies, is debated. Some say it was a direct reference to a real cult, and others think it was a mocking nickname. It's possible the original name was Beelzebul, meaning Lord of the High Place or Heavenly Dwelling, which would make more sense for a deity associated with the sky. But Zevav stuck, and over time the name took on a more sinister meaning. Later on, in texts like the Testament of Solomon, Beelzebub claims to have been a high-ranking angel who now causes destruction, stirs up conflict, and leads people toward worship of lesser spirits. He's associated with the evening star, Venus, and sometimes mixed up with Lucifer. By the medieval period, Beelzebub was firmly placed in the demonological hierarchies, often described as a prince of hell, second only to Satan. He's listed among the 7 deadly demons and linked to gluttony and envy, depending on the source. Writers like Johann Weyer and Sebastian Michaelis describe him as a powerful fallen angel. In Paradise Lost, he sits beside Satan as his closest advisor. Big promotion. During the European witch trials, his name comes up frequently in confessions and exorcisms. Needless to say, he's a very busy demon. During the witch trials, Beelzebub became one of the church's favorite scapegoats for just about everything, from temptation and possession to the supposed moral rot spreading through villages. Witch-hunting manuals like the Malleus Maleficarum claimed he lured people into pacts, attended witches' sabbaths, and spread sin like a disease. All the allegations helped cement his role as the demon of corruption. The shift from regional god to demon wasn't entirely an accident. It just so happened that as religions developed and drew clear lines, older deities were reclassified. And that's how Beelzebub went from Skylord to Lord of the Flies. There's a demon Beelzebub is particularly fond of. You'll meet him in Tier 2. In the meantime, you're about to meet Satan's wardrobe manager, Adramelech. Adramelech is generally depicted with a human torso, a mule's head, a peacock's tail, and limbs that look like a mix of both. In the Bible, he's listed as one of the gods worshipped by the Sepharvites, a tribe of people who were conquered by the Assyrians and relocated to Samaria. According to 2 Kings chapter 17 verse 31, they burned their children alive as offerings to him. But he was just one god among many. So he shared the stage with another god named Anamelech. They may have been a pair because both of them required child sacrifice as a method of worship. The name Adramelech likely means majestic king. Scholars once tried to link him to Baal or even Hadad, but most of that's been debunked. What remains is that he was associated with fire, power, and killing your own children to stay on his good side. Later tradition turned him into a demon, which is what usually happens when a god goes out of fashion. According to the Talmud, his idol looked like a donkey or a peacock, depending on which rabbis you ask. In Paradise Lost, John Milton gives him a supporting role as a fallen angel, and by the 19th century, demonologists got more creative. Cullen de Plancy's Infernal Dictionary appoints him as Hell's Senate President and Satan's personal wardrobe manager. Yep. The level of bureaucratic nonsense Hell apparently runs on now includes wardrobe management. Tier 2. Lucifer. Satan. Lucifer is the angel who staged the first rebellion. When he did it, he wasn't some horned monster lurking in the shadows. He was flawless, high-ranking, and powerful. But he wanted God's throne for himself. His pride got him cast out of heaven, and in Christian demonology, that fall is the origin of the devil. The name Lucifer only appears once in the Bible. In Isaiah chapter 14 verse 12, where it calls someone the morning star, son of the dawn. Originally, it was a poetic jab at the king of Babylon, not a demon. But early Christian thinkers like Origen and Augustine turned it into the backstory of heaven's greatest traitor. Over time, the Latin word for the planet Venus became the name everyone associates with spiritual treason. What makes Lucifer disturbing isn't fire and brimstone. It's that he was perfect, beautiful, respected. Some traditions say he led worship in heaven and stood just below God in authority. Yet he convinced a third of the angels to follow him straight into darkness. That's the blueprint for every act of pride and rebellion in Christian theology. It starts with thinking you deserve more than God. Unlike the lower tier demons blamed for possessions and poltergeists, Lucifer plays a slower and smarter game. He works through whispers and ideas, and he tempts with ambition, pride, and the same lie that ruined him. You could be your own God. If Christian theology is right, he isn't rotting in hell. He's out here, moving quietly, watching the proud and smiling when he sees someone start to look a little too much like him. Legion. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus meets a man who's possessed, but he wasn't just screaming in the street, muttering to animals possessed. This guy was living in a graveyard, mutilating himself with rocks, and he was strong enough to snap chains like they were made of string. Jesus does what any exorcist would do in the situation, asks the demon's name, and it answered, "My name is Legion, for we are many." That sentence has now stuck around for over 2,000 years, and made appearances in just about every demon-based horror movie ever made. In demonology, Legion is one of the earliest clear examples of a multi-entity possession. By that, I mean a hive of spirits speaking with one voice. The New Testament doesn't explicitly say how many demons were in him, but later interpretations, especially medieval grimoires, latch onto the Roman military context. A Roman legion had 3,000 to 6,000 soldiers, and so that's the number of people settled on. The poor man was dealing with thousands of demons, packed into his body, sharing one mind and one will. Unlike other named demons in later Christian lore like Beelzebub, Asmodeus, and Belial, Legion isn't a personality. You can think of it like an organized infestation, or worse still, an invasion. When Jesus commands the demons to leave, they beg him not to throw them into the abyss. He responds by tossing them into a herd of about 2,000 pigs. Moments later, they immediately stampede into the sea and drown, every last one of them. The townsfolk come out, see the man calm and clothed, and instead of celebrating, they ask Jesus to leave. Why? Probably because he just destroyed their livestock economy in under 5 minutes. The pigs were vessels, and the demons killed themselves, or killed the pigs to escape, or were doing what they always do, destroying whatever they touch. I guess we'll never know. What we do know is that demonology seems to have a thing for pigs. In Tier 6, there's an entry where people turn into pigs and commit all kinds of crime. Astaroth. The first thing you need to know here is that Astaroth isn't the goddess Astarte from Phoenician and Canaanite mythology. She's the Canaanite and Phoenician goddess of love, war, and fertility, often linked to Ishtar and Aphrodite. The demon Astaroth just stole her name, which is not unheard of in demonology. All it takes is thousands of years of cultural drift, some mistranslations, and here we are. The version of Astaroth we know today comes mostly from grimoires in the 1400s and 1500s. These were handwritten guides on how to summon demons if you needed help ruining your life. Astaroth shows up often, usually described as a great duke of hell, who rides a dragon, holds a snake, and gives surprisingly good advice. He's said to rule over 40 legions of spirits, which is impressive until you realize nobody actually knows what that means. Still, most people can't even manage a group chat. He also answers any question you ask, and sounds like an overall great guy, but then you remember that he is a demon. Astaroth supposedly tempts people with laziness, self-doubt, and bad philosophy. Nothing extreme like murder or plagues. He just likes making people think too much and do too little. So if you've ever been stuck overthinking your life while putting off important schoolwork, congratulations, that's Astaroth. Medieval writers have claimed that he attacks the hardest in August, and that he could teach math, make you invisible, or hand you a treasure map. That's quite the range. Later, demonologists claimed he was a prince of accusers, inquisitors, which basically means he's the one hell consults when it wants to lawyer up. One fun historical footnote is that he was listed as a co-signer on a demonic pact used in a 1634 trial and execution of French priest Urban Grandier. So people have died because of his name, but there are still no confirmed sightings. Lerai. Lerai is a proper quintessential demon that shows up in all the usual demonology guest lists like the Lesser Key of Solomon, Pseudemonarchia Daemonum, and Dictionnaire Infernal. In all of them, he's called the Marquis of Hell, and his job includes starting fights, spreading decay, and ruining bodies. He's described as handsome, which oddly is a fact that comes up a lot, and he's said to be gallant even. He wears green, carries a bow, and always looks like he's about to win a medieval archery tournament. But when any of his arrows pierce the body, it rots the wound quickly. 30 legions of demons work under him, or 33, depending on who's telling the story. Either way, that's a lot of backup for one guy in green tights. Some texts also say he can summon or dismiss lovers and can end relationships on command. He can also start them, which would be a deeply devastating power in today's world considering the dating pool. Weyer, one of the old scholars who cataloged this sort of thing, added that Lerai can also disperse mobs. If you're wondering how that works well, everyone just suddenly decided they've got something better to do. Larai's not one of the famous demons, so there are no cults or historic possessions attributed to him. But if ever you wanted to ruin a kingdom quietly, he's your guy. Abizu. Abizu shows up across centuries and continents with many names and no known shape, except for a few constants. She's always female, she's always angry, and she wants children she can never have. In the Testament of Solomon, Solomon is interrogating demons like he usually does when Abizu appears with wild snake hair and a face that gleams sickly green. He describes her body as just darkness. She tells him she never sleeps and only wanders endlessly, looking for women in labor. If she gets close enough, she strangles the child. That's her whole purpose. Although the other problems she spreads for fun include madness, deafness, eye trouble, body pain, and sore throats. But it's the infants she really wants. The reason is simple. She's barren, and envy makes her vicious. So Solomon chains her by the hair and hangs her outside the temple as a warning, which was good news for all the women who were pregnant at the time. Still, they couldn't get too comfortable, because Abizu wasn't the only demon gunning for them. There was also Pontianak, though her reasons were a little different. You'll find out why in Tier 6. But first, let's talk about the demon even Beelzebub himself had something to say about, Abizethebu. In the Testament of Solomon, there's a demon named Abizethebu, and while he's not one of the famous ones, he was still important enough to be mentioned by Beelzebub himself. According to the story, he followed Beelzebub when the angels fell and tore off one of his wings in the process. He landed in hell, missing a piece of himself, and the wing that was left had turned red. After that, he made himself useful by becoming a strategist and advisor to Beelzebub. He took on the role of keeping things in order in Tartarus, which is hell's basement for the truly condemned. He was the one in charge of keeping the worst beings locked up. He shows up later in Egypt too, and in this version, which you'll find in the Testament of Solomon, it wasn't God who hardened Pharaoh's heart. It was Abizethebu. It was he who convinced Pharaoh and his advisors to chase the Israelites. And when the Red Sea collapsed, the Egyptian army drowned, and Abizethebu drowned with them. But he didn't die. Instead, he got stuck, sealed inside a pillar of water. And according to Beelzebub, he's still there. In the Testament of Solomon, Abizethebu claims he used to sit in the first heaven before the war. This was way before he became a prison guard and got buried under the sea. He says he held the Egyptian sorcerers Janus and Jambres and gave them power to fight Moses with signs and wonders. Beelzebub says Abizethebu will come back from imprisonment one day, when he's ready. Baphomet. In the Christian demonology pipeline, Baphomet didn't start out as a demon. He first appeared as a legal accusation. In 1307, King Philip IV of France had many members of the Knights Templar arrested and tortured. He owed them a lot of money, and he wanted their wealth and influence gone. So he gathered hundreds of them, accused them of a bunch of different crimes, and then tortured them into confessing. Problem solved. Under torture, some confessed to worshipping a mysterious head called Baphomet. Others said it had 3 faces, or was a skull, or a cat, or possibly Jesus. There's a very high chance that none of it existed because there's no record of any Baphomet in official Templar rules. But the Inquisition didn't know that, so they ran with it. By the 19th century, Baphomet had been recycled by occultist Eliphas Levi. He gave it a makeover and turned it into a winged goat with assets, a torch on its head, one hand pointing up and one down. Levi said this symbol showed the balance of opposites, male and female, human and animal, light and dark. You get the idea. That image, not the Templar stuff, is what stuck. It got adopted into occult circles, some Freemason speculation, and eventually pop Satanism. So what or who is Baphomet really? That depends a lot on who's asking. In occultism, it's a symbol. In fundamentalist Christian demonology, it's a literal demon, aka proof of satanic infiltration. In Templar history, it's either a smear campaign or a ritual gone wrong. In all cases, it's disturbing for the same reason. People keep using it as a catch-all for whatever scares them, including heresy, adult stuff, witchcraft, or simply not following the program. Baphomet was never actually worshipped in an organized structure, so it has no consistent doctrine, and yet it shows up over and over again as the face of ultimate rebellion, put together from paranoia, projection, and goat parts. Oh, and some people like to associate it with the Illuminati, but that's a whole other story. If you think Baphomet's origin story is weird, wait till Tier 5. Where you'll hear about the demon that was born from the sweat of the Hindu goddess Parvati. Tier 3. Iblis or Eblis. In Islam, Iblis's villain origin story starts with a simple argument. The first crack wasn't a war, it was an argument. God created Adam, and then told the angels to bow to his new creation. They all bowed, except Iblis, who, by the way, is the biblical equivalent of Satan. He said no, but not because he didn't believe in God. Quite the opposite. Iblis thought he was staying true to him. Some Sufis even call this loyalty, but most say it was just pride talking. This moment is detailed in multiple places in the Quran, including Surah al-Baqarah, Surah al-Araf, and Surah Sad. Iblis argued that his refusal wasn't defiance, but a kind of fidelity to God's uniqueness. He claimed that bowing to Adam violated God's exclusive right to be worshipped. Now, here's where it gets tricky. He wasn't human, and he wasn't quite an angel either. Depending on which scholar you ask, he was either the highest of the jinn, pretending to be an angel, or an angel who messed up so badly he had to be reclassified. What's agreed is this: he was formed from fire, and he thought fire was better than clay. This reasoning that fire is nobler than clay is recorded in Surah al-Araf, where Iblis says, "You created me from fire and created him from clay." His arrogance is what ultimately damned him. Since he refused to bow to what he saw as a lesser being, he was kicked out of God's presence. According to the Quran in Surah al-Hijr and Surah Sad, Iblis asked God to give him time until the day of judgment so he could mislead humans, and God allowed it as a test for mankind. From that moment, his mission became tempting people away from the straight path. In line with the agreement he made with God, Iblis whispers and he invites, but he does not force. That's the rule. If you fall because you wanted to. Some Sufi thinkers complicate this further by calling him the true monotheist, because he bows not to a human or even to heaven itself, but only to God. They say he failed on purpose, as a kind of dark devotion. Others say that's nonsense, and that's exactly the kind of trick Iblis would pull, to make rebellion look like loyalty, and make you feel smart while you sin. Jinn. The jinn are not quite demons, but they're not quite ghosts either. They are supernatural beings from the Arabian world, and while they were absorbed into Islam, they are older than it. Pre-Islamic Arab tribes worshipped them until Islam came along and demoted them from god status. Jinn have free will, which is not very characteristic of demons. They can also be good or bad, and usually, most are just minding their business. But when they're bad, they're not cartoon villains. They like to go all out. They live in desolate places and have the ability to shapeshift. Their common forms include appearing as snakes, scorpions, lizards, and deformed humanoids. Sometimes they help people and can even fall in love with them, but some might kill you and take over your body. You usually don't get to pick. The Muslim world widely believes in possession by jinn, so people wear talismans with God's name to avoid attacks. Some go to exorcists when symptoms like seizures, voices, sudden strength, and depression start to plague them. Jinn possession is considered a legitimate illness by many. And while some Islamic scholars disagree, they're not the ones getting scratched by invisible things at night. Jinn aren't just folklore. They have legal status in Islamic jurisprudence. For example, they can own property. They're expected to follow Islamic law. And surprisingly, there are debates. If you think the bizarre stuff stops there, think again. There are hadiths about jinn-human mating. Most scholars say don't do it, but people try anyway. And not shockingly, those stories usually end badly. At best, the kid turns out gifted, and at worst, you die. That said, it's in your best interest to maybe stick with your kind when it's time to play. If you step on a jinn in the forest or walk into a bathroom without saying Bismillah, which is exactly what you're supposed to say to keep them away, folklore says you've basically handed them a written invitation to ruin your night. Ifrit. The word Ifrit appears in the Quran only once, when a demon offers to carry a queen's throne to Solomon. He's strong, fast, and very eager to impress. However, he gets passed over when God gives the job to someone else. After that, they show up here and there in old books, usually trying to disrupt prophets, possess people, or demand attention. In folklore, it's even worse. The Ifrit goes from being just demon to being the big, bitter, fiery bullies who live underground. They live in the parts of the world humans are smart enough to avoid, like deserts, ruins, and graveyards, and are usually tied to murder, revenge, and sometimes the dead themselves, especially if the dead didn't die peacefully. Islamic texts say God sometimes sends them to test people, which is what the scholars say happened in the case of Job, the prophet. He gets tormented by 3 Ifrits as part of his suffering, but it later turns out it's not his punishment, just some kind of training. When people try to answer the question of where exactly Ifrits come from, things get tricky.
In some Egyptian folklore, it's believed that a murdered person's soul can turn into an ifrit. The theory is that if it hangs around the crime scene long enough, it'll get mad enough to become a fiery, vicious demon. The only way to stop this from happening is to drive a nail into the spilled blood, which raises the question, are we pinning the soul to the floor, or just giving it something to think about? Ifrits also show up in stories like 1001 Nights, where they kidnap women, shapeshift into monsters, and get tricked into jars, which is the Western version people remember. Tier 4. Succubus. In folklore, a succubus is a demon that feeds on men by sleeping with them. She drains energy, steals their fluids, and sometimes comes back night after night until the man is sick, broken, or dead. It was taken seriously enough that medieval rabbis and priests held exorcisms to stop it. The word succubus has Latin origins. It means to lie beneath, which tells you both what she does and how the church felt about it. Early stories from Jewish mysticism name Lilith, the first wife of Adam, as the original succubus. Apparently, because she refused to submit, she got with the archangel Samael instead, and ended up spawning legions of demons. We'll get to the details later in Tier 6. Succubi supposedly use the fluids they take to make monsters. They pass it to male demons called incubi, who then impregnate women. The offspring, called cambions, were used to explain birth defects or kids with weird powers. In other words, if your baby showed up looking strange or acting like a tiny evil genius, people just shrugged and said, yep, demon baby. There are some weird stories too. There's a 10th century rumor that Pope Sylvester II got his position with help from a succubus named Meridiana. She did the usual demon girlfriend thing, exchanging power and secrets for spicy time. He repented right before he died, which apparently makes it fine. Over time, the succubus changed. She stopped showing up as a clawed, ghoulish nightmare and started appearing as a pinup girl. Pretty, flawless, and harmless looking. I blame Japan. That's how she still appears in pop culture now. But in the original stories, she appeared with animal claws, forced men to go down on her, and left them empty and hallucinating. Incubus. The incubus is basically the male version of a succubus. He shows up while you're asleep to do the same kind of spicy things. He mostly targets women, and the experience is said to be so intense that it can leave the victim drained, mentally unstable, or even dead. In early legends, these visits were so intense that they were reproductive. The incubus didn't stop at haunting dreams. He wanted kids. The most famous spawn is Merlin, who, in Christian legend, wasn't born from a man and woman, but from an incubus and some unlucky mortal, which is one way to explain a socially awkward kid with magic powers. Older records go further back to Sumerian myths that list a demon named Lilu, who disturbed women in their sleep. He had a female version, Lilitu, who showed up in men's dreams. The Malleus Maleficarum, the handbook for witch hunters, also had full sections on how to drive off incubi, including confession, relocation, and Hail Marys. But it didn't always work. Some priests said these demons didn't care about holy objects, priests, or logic. Of course, modern medicine has a different take. It explains these experiences as sleep paralysis mixed with hypnagogia, that hazy state between waking and sleeping where your brain can throw hallucinations at you. Combine that with shame, repressed desire, or a few too many sermons, and suddenly your own brain is tricking you into believing you were attacked by something supernatural. Some cultures blame demons like incubi to avoid more uncomfortable explanations. Things like desire repression, trauma, or even assault, and sometimes it helped cover up actual crimes. In other cases, people truly believed they were being attacked, when it was really just repressed desire showing up through dreams or sleep paralysis. Calling it a demon just made it easier to process. Regional versions exist almost everywhere. The Alp in German folklore, the Boto in the Amazon, which is a dolphin that turns into a man, seduces women, then vanishes into the river. The Leiderk in Hungary, which is sometimes, oddly, a glowing chicken. The Perelesnik in Ukraine, which gives you fake treasure and takes your life force. They all follow the same script. Visit at night, seduce, weaken, disappear. Or so the stories go. Pazuzu. Pazuzu is a bug-eyed, winged, dog-faced demon with a snake for genitals and a scorpion tail. In case you're still not sure what in the Frankenstein this is, he also comes with 4 wings and bird claws. Pazuzu comes from ancient Mesopotamia, the region of Babylon and Assyria. He was a wind demon, and specifically, he brought plague. Sounds like a brazy guy. Here's what's weird. Despite all that, people still loved him. They wore his face on necklaces, hung him above their beds, and buried him with their dead. But it was not because he was nice. It was because he scared off worse demons.
mainly one named Lamashtu, who liked to attack babies and pregnant women. So to stop her, they'd invite him. If you're wondering why anyone would let a demon with a snake member babysit their newborn, that should help you understand just how bad Lamashtu was. We'll get to her in Tier 5. Women in labor wore Pazuzu amulets to keep her away and invoked his name in rituals to stop miscarriages. These charms were in such high demand that they were mass-produced in gold, bronze, glass, whatever worked. His head was everywhere. However, this demon was a bit bipolar. At home, he was a protector, but elsewhere, he was an evil, raging monster, smashing through evil spirits and possibly also people. He's been called Agony of Mankind and Disease of Mankind, but also the one who chases demons into the underworld. He's a 2 for the price of 1 demon package. Some scholars think he shares roots with Bes, the Egyptian household god, because both were ugly, both protected mothers, and both showed up in the same pose on protective amulets. And yes, in case you're asking, Pazuzu is the demon from The Exorcist. Hollywood didn't invent him. Ahriman, Angramanyu. Ahriman, who sometimes goes by Angramanyu, is one of those figures who shows up as a demon in some sources, a god or spirit in others, and sometimes both at once. He's the literal spirit of destruction, the one who invented storms, plagues, and monsters. He made all the worst stuff, on purpose. Which makes sense for a guy whose name sounds like Angry Man. Why would anyone create such a demon? Well, it started with Ahura Mazda, the god of light, truth, and creation. Ahriman is his opposite in Zoroastrianism, and his entire purpose is to ruin whatever Mazda makes because he represents chaos, lies, and decay. If Mazda builds, Ahriman tears it down. And if Mazda creates paradise, Ahriman adds a leak in the ceiling and rats in the basement. According to the Avesta, these two forces are locked in a long, miserable war. Ahura Mazda creates the world, and Ahriman immediately responds with counter-creations, including 16 plagues, disasters, and monstrosities. This particular beef is a full-time job. He leads the Devas, a group of deceptive false gods who later become full demons. When that fails, he sends wave after wave of demons, and even cooks up a custom serpent monster called Azi Dahaka. He probably didn't get his desired result with this one, because he then tries to dry up the oceans when all else doesn't work. This guy fails. A lot. But he's persistent. He never stops trying. Zoroastrian texts never really say he was created by anyone. Ahriman just is. Later, a branch of the religion called Zurvanism tried to explain where evil came from by saying that Ahura Mazda and Ahriman were twins born of a god called Zurvan, who represented time. The story goes that Ahriman, being the kind of spirit who doesn't wait his turn, ripped open the womb to be born first. For that, he got temporary rule over the world for 9,000 years. Then, Mazda takes over. Eventually, later texts and scholars tried to walk it back and say Ahriman isn't real and never existed. But the older stories say he's real. He's dangerous. He made monsters. And he's still out there, somewhere, ruining things. Ashma. In Zoroastrianism, there's a demon who exists just to ruin your spiritual focus. His name is Ashma, the demon of wrath. And just so he can look the part, his weapon of choice is a mace soaked in blood. If someone suddenly gets mad, flips a table mid-ritual, and forgets why they were praying to begin with, yep, that's Ashma. According to the text, he ruins the intention and meaning of religious acts by sending side distractions like war, cattle slaughter, and getting too drunk to stand. Basically, if you're trying to connect to the divine and suddenly there's yelling and gore, that's him. His main enemy is Sraosha, the spirit of obedience, which makes sense, I guess. Ashma and his nemesis Sraosha both carry maces, but Sraosha is freakishly strong. Oh, and Ashma answers directly to Ahriman. He serves as his messenger and resident chaos delivery service. In some texts, he's even promoted to commander of all the demons, but that doesn't last, and he's eventually defeated. Depending on the version, either Sraosha or the Soxian, a messiah-like figure, takes him out, or he just runs away like a coward. Before you go into panic mode, the good news is you can get rid of him by saying a prayer. Just one prayer and he doesn't stand a chance. But if you skip it or mess up your ceremony, they say that your worship might as well be for Ashma himself. Akamana. Akamana is the demon of evil thought. In Zoroastrianism, he's the disturbing whisper in your head telling you to do all kinds of bad things. His name literally means evil mind in the ancient Iranian language Avestan. Later, he's called Akaman or Akvan. His job is simple. Corrupt the mind, twist judgment, and sabotage moral thinking. He was one of the first things Ahriman made, which makes him super important in the Zoroastrian demon chain of command. He shows up early in the Gathas, the oldest Zoroastrian texts. At first, he only exists as a bad state of mind. He's not a demon yet, but by the time the younger Avesta was written, he had a face, a name, and a target, the Vohumana, or good mind, who stands for wisdom and moral clarity. According to the text, Akamana tries to seize the Harana, or divine glory, for himself, and he fails, of course, but not for a lack of trying. He also personally tries to keep Zoroaster by sending him 99 questions, all meant to make him doubt his faith. But Zoroaster outthinks the demon. Later texts say he makes newborns cry by showing them terrifying visions of the end of the world. He was also blamed for planting greed, doubt, deception, corruption, resentment, despair, and every other destructive impulse in the human mind. He fuels paranoia and insecurity. And if you've ever met someone who ruins every conversation by assuming the worst, that's his work. Honestly, the guy does so much, it feels like whoever's in charge of the Zoroastrian underworld forgot how to delegate. In Persian folklore, Akvan even offers lifts to heroes just to drop them in the opposite place they asked for. He's, for all intents and purposes, super petty. Tier 5. Mara. If Buddha had a nemesis, it would be Mara. He's the one who tried to stop the Buddha from achieving enlightenment by sending distractions. First, with his army. Then he sent his 3 daughters, who understood the assignment a little too much. They got undressed and tried everything they could to get him to budge. But Buddha didn't flinch. In Buddhism, Mara transcends being a demon to being a system. He's death and desire. The word Mara literally comes from the Sanskrit form of the verbal root mur, and it means to kill. But instead of your body, he kills your clarity, your motivation, and your ability to stay on the path. Mara shows up in Buddhist scripture as a person and a force that distracts people from focusing on their spiritual life. Well, that's until he got converted. According to a later Buddhist story, Mara once tried to curse a monk named Upagupta. Instead, the monk gave him a necklace made from corpses. I bet you didn't see that one coming. Mara panicked and ran to a god for help, only to be told that he had to seek refuge with the monk he'd just tried to curse. In the end, he swallowed his pride, bowed, and promised to stop fighting the Dharma. The story doesn't spell out exactly why Mara panicked, but most scholars agree that the necklace symbolized impermanence, something Mara manipulates but refuses to face, and that's what rattled him. Rakshasa. So here's the thing about Rakshasas. People like to call them demons, but that's a bit lazy. They're not just evil for kicks. They're old, organized, and extremely competent. They show up all over South and Southeast Asian mythology, like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and even some strands of Indonesian Islam. Everyone seems to have run into one at some point. Rakshasas are mostly in forests. They can shapeshift, fly, disappear, and create illusions so good you'd swear you were seeing God. But you're likely to get ripped apart or tricked into walking off a cliff if you met one. Their default mood is either hungry or offended, and they respond to both with violence. In the Ramayana, an epic Hindu text, they're ruled by Ravana, the 10-headed king of Lanka who uses illusion magic to kidnap Sita, wife of the hero prince Rama. That act kicks off a divine war that ends with Ravana's death at Rama's hands. Some Rakshasas do defect to the good side. Others are just morally confused. But the ones who aren't confused eat people and ruin sacred rituals for fun. In the Mahabharata, Rakshasas get even nastier. One of the 5 heroic Pandava brothers, Bhima, has whole side stories where he wanders into the forest and ends up wrestling cannibal ogres to death with his bare hands. A pretty clear sign of how common and dangerous these things were in the epic's world. One Rakshasa, named Bakasura, demanded human deliveries like pizza. Another tried to steal weapons and assault a queen. There's a pattern here, and it's violence. Buddhist texts occasionally redeem them. In the Lotus Sutra, some female Rakshasas vow to protect the teachings of the Buddha, which is sweet, but also slightly terrifying when you think about how exactly they intend to do that, considering these are the same beings who drink blood out of skulls in other stories. In general, you should just hope they don't notice you. And if they do, run, if you can. Andaka. Andaka was an Asura born by accident. Shiva, the Hindu god of destruction and transformation, was meditating one day when Parvati, his wife, playfully covered his eyes. Because Shiva is, well, Shiva, this blacked out the entire universe. Parvati's hands started sweating because she was touching his all-powerful third eye. The sweat hit the ground, and out came a blind, horrifying child. They named him Andaka because he was blind. Shiva gave the kid away to a demon king, probably to avoid having to explain things at family dinners. And when the king died, Andaka took the throne. Then, like every insecure tyrant with too much power, he demanded more. Specifically, he wanted Parvati, the wife of Shiva, his father, who also happened to be his mother. He didn't know that at the time, but still, trying to kidnap your mom because she's hot and unavailable is the kind of thing that would have kept Freud writing for years. This dude actually went to war over it. He sent a messenger to Shiva saying, "Hand over your wife." And Shiva said no. Andaka didn't like that, so he got his army ready and attacked. The gods fought back, but they didn't know what they were getting into. Every time someone pierced Andaka, his blood made more of him. There were thousands of clones every time he bled. The only solution was for a group of terrifying, bloodthirsty goddesses to follow him around and slurp up his blood mid-air before clones could spawn. Shiva eventually impaled him on a trident and just left him there for years, hanging like a grotesque kebab. Until finally, Andaka realized that the woman he wanted was his own mother, and the god he fought was his father. Well, that's messy. He begged for forgiveness, and unlike most stories where the creepy guy gets obliterated, Shiva actually forgave him and made him a leader of his ghostly squad. It's a wild ending, but hey, Hindu gods aren't exactly famous for their strict parenting style. Apep Apophis. Apophis lived for just one thing, to destroy the world and sabotage Ra, the sun god, at every turn. So every night, when Ra sailed below the horizon and entered the underworld, Apophis, who's usually depicted as a massive serpent, would already be there waiting. He'd be buried in the dark, watching for his chance to strike. To some, Apophis was a god. To others, he was a demon. And to a few, he was both. A full-blown demon god. He ruled over chaos, destruction, silence, and nothingness. And he was always down to cause a little mayhem. Some myths said Apophis had a flint head and a body longer than a barge. Others just say he was eternal, born from the chaotic waters of Nun before the world was even formed. In one version, he came from the saliva of the ancient Egyptian goddess, Neith, when she was still in the primeval waters. The people who believe he's been in existence from the beginning of time use that belief to explain why after every fight he never died. They say it's because he wasn't even alive in the usual way. Each night, Apophis might attack Ra from a mountain, or from the 10th region of the night. Sometimes earthquakes and storms were said to be his doing. Lucky for Ra, he's always had defenders. Like Set, for example, whose only useful skill seemed to be stabbing things. And eventually, Apophis would be cut, burned up, or chopped up. Then it would all happen again the next night when he returns for round 2. Egyptian priests didn't take any chances. They ran yearly rituals to symbolically kill him using wax models. They spat on them, stomped on them, then burned them. Some funerary texts even came with spells to protect the dead from Apophis, just in case he tried to take them on the way out. The point is, he never wins. But if he did just once, it'd be game over for the cosmos. Lamashtu. In ancient Mesopotamia, most demons were basically hitmen for the gods. But not Lamashtu. She was a demon because she felt like it. She acted on her own, with no orders, no assignments, and no mercy. And she was such a terror that people wrote entire rituals just to keep her out of their homes. She had the head of a lion, donkey teeth, long clawed fingers, the feet of a giant bird, and howled like a starving dog. She lived in the underworld, but didn't like to stay there. She came up whenever she wanted, especially to attack newborns. Pregnant women were easy targets, and so were their babies. If one died at birth, or mysteriously in the night, she got blamed. People believed she literally showed up, crawled into the house, and ripped the child away. The books say she touched bellies to pull out fetuses, drank blood, and spread disease. She was also said to poison water, rot plants, and bring nightmares just by passing by. Because she was so hard to stop, people prayed to another demon to hold her back. That was Pazuzu, the violent, ugly, and cruel guy we talked about earlier. But compared to her, he was a security guard. Sometimes both demons would be carved into the same amulet, locked in eternal staring contests over the baby's cradle. The rituals to banish her involved making a little figurine, feeding it, washing it, and sticking it in a black dog's mouth. The dog had to carry it for 3 days, and then the figurine would be buried by a wall to trap her evil and protect the family. Tier 6. Lilith. Lilith may have been the first woman to get a divorce, and she did it before all the demon stuff. Often described as Adam's first wife, she shows up in Jewish folklore, but she's barely in the Bible. The only possible mention is in Isaiah chapter 34 verse 14, where a reference is made to a night monster, but we'll get to that later. One Latin version just calls her a Lamia, which is a whole different nightmare. The idea of Lilith really takes off in the medieval period, where Jewish mystics gave her a full backstory. They said she was made from the same clay as Adam, which makes her his equal, not a spare rib. But when Adam tried to make her obey him, she walked straight out of Eden. The story goes that she then hooked up with Samael, an archangel with a bad reputation, and started having demon children, lots of them. After Lilith left Eden, she turned into something else entirely. She got blamed for infant deaths, infertility, and bad dreams. She's often depicted with wings and bird feet. She was crafted into amulets, bowls, and incantations to keep her out of the house. Some were even worded like legal documents, like ancient restraining orders, telling her she had no rights to the baby or the family. People have tried connecting her to the Mesopotamian spirits like Lamashtu. The comparison makes sense on paper, but the evidence is shaky at best. Also, it's not clear if she started as a demon or a goddess, but whatever she was feared. Some later stories tried to soften her or turn her into a symbol of freedom, but in the older texts, she's not fighting the system. She is the threat. Namtar. In ancient Mesopotamian religion, Namtar was the personal assistant of Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld. His name literally means fate, but it was the kind that comes with disease and decay. He wasn't exactly worshipped, because people were more interested in avoiding him than impressing him. Rather than pray to Namtar, they prayed to survive him. Most of what we know about him comes from myths, curses, and medical incantations begging other gods to make him go away. If you were struck with sudden headaches, chest pains, or unexplained wasting, it was likely that Namtar had passed by. He was technically a minor god, but he also doubled as the demon of disease, and he acted more like a virus than a deity. People described him as venomous, twisted, and dangerous. In one Assyrian vision of the underworld, he's just casually stabbing a man with a sword. Namtar's main job was delivering divine punishment. He was the one Ereshkigal sent when she needed something done without leaving the underworld. In the myth called Ishtar's Descent, it's Namtar who hits the goddess with 60 diseases. Later, he's also the one who walks her half-dead body back out from the underworld. Another time, the god Nergal disrespected him at a heavenly banquet. So Namtar tattled to Ereshkigal, got the guy dragged into the underworld, and nearly triggered a divine war. His job also included keeping other demons in line. Some spells actually asked Namtar to imprison worse spirits in the underworld. That's right, people didn't exactly like him, but they turned to him when they needed help getting rid of other demons. Namtar may have had a wife named Hushbishag and a daughter, but their stories got lost in scattered god lists and half-preserved rituals, so we don't know much about them. Rusalka. In Slavic folklore, the Rusalka is the spirit of a woman who drowned by her own hand or someone else's. Either way, it ends with her body in a river and her soul refusing to move on. People used to think that they were nature spirits who brought water to fields in the spring, made crops grow, and maybe even danced a little under the moonlight. That was the old belief till the stories changed. Somewhere between the 18th and 19th centuries, Rusalki turned into deadly spirits that waited in rivers and lakes for someone to get too close. Usually a man. They're usually drop-dead gorgeous, with long hair, pale skin, and slender limbs. They sing, smile, or cry to lure you in, then drag you under with their hair, or hold you tight until your lungs fill with water and you drown. Sometimes they tickle people to death. Yep, you heard that right. The appearance and habitat of a Rusalka depends on the region. In Ukraine, they mostly live in rivers, and in Belarus, they're found in the forest. Polish and Czech versions describe differences based on age and hair color, but the ending is usually the same. The victim doesn't come back. In the 7 days that make up Rusalka Week, which comes once a year in late spring, they're super active. So active that people weren't allowed to swim during that time. At the end of the week, communities would hold mock funerals for the Rusalki to send them back down, but it never really worked. There are some Rusalki that actually have names, like Dana, who was drowned by her stepmother, Kostroma, who accidentally married her brother, and Marina, who lured her old lover into the river after he married someone else. Today, they get mistaken for mermaids, but it is said that the vengeful spirits haunt because no one stopped what happened to them. Krampus. Krampus isn't technically a demon in the religious sense, but try telling that to the terrified kids in Alpine villages. He's a hairy, horned figure from the Alpine regions who shows up in early December, just before the feast of St. Nicholas. While St. Nick gives sweets to good kids, Krampus carries a bundle of sticks and sometimes a sack. The sticks are for hitting, and the sack is for kidnapping. Allegedly, he drowns or eats children who misbehave, and this creepy lore is presented as a normal part of holiday festivities. He's described as having one human foot and one goat hoof, along with fangs, a long tongue, and a body covered in dark hair. On Krampusnacht, he walks the streets, swatting at children, often with Nicholas, but sometimes alone. He was banned in Austria in the 1930s by a fascist government that considered him too scary for children, and later pamphlets called him evil, but that didn't stop him. He's back now though, showing up in city festivals, postcards, and horror films. There are even Krampus societies and pub crawls in the US. While some just like the costumes, others lean into the punishment themes a little too enthusiastically. Old Krampus cards, called Krampuskarten, show him leering at children or chasing women with his tongue out. In a few, he's vaguely inappropriate. But this was before Hallmark sanitized the holidays. Pontianak. In Southeast Asia, when you hear a baby cry in the dark and there's no baby around, it's highly recommended that you take off running. That's a kuntilanak, or Pontianak if you're in Malaysia. She's what happens when a woman dies alone and angry during childbirth. The kuntilanak is a violent soul and is usually described as a blood-soaked woman in white with red eyes, long black hair, and sharp fingernails. She is also said to have preferred victims. She goes after men first and seduces them if she needs to. She laughs like a woman, or screams like an infant depending on the occasion. If the sound is loud, you're safe. But if it's quiet, she's already too close. Sometimes there's a sweet smell, like plumeria flowers, but it's just to throw you off before the smell of rot kicks in. According to the Malay stories, she rips people open with her nails and eats their organs. Some say she targets pregnant women and infants. Others say she finds her prey by sniffing freshly washed clothes. That's why, to this day, people in some regions don't hang laundry out overnight. In her case, though, there's a fix. Hammer a nail into the back of her neck or the top of her head, and she'll turn into a docile, beautiful woman. She could even become a wife. That is, until the nail comes out. She's also associated with banana trees, which sounds ridiculous until you realize people actually avoid planting them near homes for this reason. Modern films and folklore have tried to soften her image and make her a tragic anti-hero, but the old stories don't really care about redemption. She died badly and turned into a vicious killer, period. The city of Pontianak in Indonesia is named after her, and to clear the area, the founders claimed they fired actual cannons at the ghosts. Of course, it's up to you to decide whether or not you believe that. 29 entries, 5 levels. From a secretive council that rules the world from the shadows, to anomalies that will hunt you down just for seeing their face, these are the most disturbing SCPs ever written. Level 1. Mildly unsettling or neutral. O5 Council. Let's start at the top. Literally. If you want to know who runs the SCP Foundation, it's the O5 Council. Officially, they're called Overwatch Command. Everyone else just says the O5s. They sit way above everybody else and nobody outranks them. So what's the big deal? Secrecy. Not just a little, Illuminati level secrecy. Nobody's even sure how many O5s there are. Some files say 13. Others hint maybe it's more or less. Or that the number changes when nobody's looking. If you're not an O5, you're not supposed to know. Simple as that. Every O5 has level 5 clearance. That's top of the top. If it's too classified for regular agents, the O5s are probably making the call. But they don't micromanage. They only show up for the world-ending stuff, like catastrophic breaches or new anomalies that could snap reality in half. For most Foundation staff, the O5s are like ghosts. You follow orders, hope you never meet one. But here's where things get interesting. You'll see claims about O513 surviving full-on reality resets, walking away from disasters that should have erased them from existence. So, are they immortal? Are they even human? Nobody really knows. Maybe some of them are anomalies too, locked up and running the Foundation at the same time. But the funny thing, that's still mild compared to what we have down this iceberg. Bottom line, the O5s are untouchable. In one storyline, the Chaos Insurgency actually manages to assassinate almost all of them. But then you hear rumors that some O5s just can't be killed, or that replacements just slide right in. Nobody's ever sure. That's how deep it goes. In the end, think of the O5 Council as the world's shadowy board of paranormal directors. They control the cover-ups, the big decisions, sometimes even create anomalies if it fits the plan. And if you think these puppet masters are unsettling, just wait until you meet the administrator on level 2. Because even the O5s answer to someone, or something, higher. The administrator's identity is so classified, some say it might not even be human. SCP-914. The Clockworks. Technically, it's a giant antique machine packed with more gears, levers, and spinning parts than your grandma's sewing kit. But if you think you can control what comes out, you haven't spent enough time around the Foundation. Here's how it works. It has 2 booths, one for intake, one for output. That's when it gets bizarre. Set a wristwatch to rough and you get back a little pile of gears and dust. Pour in a glass of water and choose very fine, and suddenly it's glowing with an unknown liquid no one wants to taste. One test produced a sheet of metal that folds itself like it's alive. Another gave them a battery that never runs out but shocks anything that touches it. There's a reason test logs are miles long. Half of it sounds made up, and the other half feels like it came from a fever dream. And still, the scientists keep coming back, because occasionally this thing gives you something useful. A level 1 keycard becomes a level 5, just like that. But push your luck, and you might accidentally birth a whole new SCP. Nobody knows where it came from. It's not evil, it's not alive, it just doesn't care. Think of it like a vending machine for cursed upgrades. No refund button, no manual, and way more existential dread. While the Clockworks turns whatever you put in it into strange twisted versions of itself, there's another machine that does something even weirder. Instead of changing things, it just makes it bigger and weirder. It's the reason for every endless hallway and infinite maze in the SCP universe. It's called SCP-184, and we'll get to that in Level 2. SCP-999, the Tickle Monster. Not every SCP is scary or dangerous. Tickle Monster is living proof that some secrets are actually really sweet. Literally. He's a jiggly orange blob that smells like happiness and feels like warm peanut butter. It's about the size of a big dog, a little heavier than a toddler and constantly bouncing with excitement. Its whole existence revolves around one mission: making people smile. It wiggles over to anyone nearby, wraps them in a squishy hug, and starts tickling them with soft jelly limbs. Doesn't matter who you are, sad, angry, cold-hearted, if you're near it, you feel better. It even releases your favorite smell, tailored just for you. Chocolate, flowers, old library books, whatever works. And the joy sticks around. People report lingering happiness hours after leaving. It's basically antidepressant slime, but way more adorable and without the side effects. Tickle Monster doesn't eat meat, doesn't attack, doesn't ask for much, just candy. M&Ms are his favorite. And if it ever accidentally hurts someone during play, it immediately deflates into a sad puddle until forgiven. The Foundation doesn't lock it up so much as give it a playroom. Staff are encouraged to visit for morale. There are full-on tickle fights, complete with mercy tap-outs and wrestling matches. But here's where things get crazy. Tickle Monster once met SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile, which we will talk about later. Basically, the most violent, unkillable creature in the entire Foundation. The reptile tried to crush it, but Tickle Monster just hugged its foot. And then 682 started laughing. A deep, uncontrollable belly laugh that lasted 15 straight minutes. It even asked for more. Of course, once 999 left, 682 snapped and went on a rampage. But even then, 999 risked itself to pull injured staff to safety. What's wild is that 999 still wants to be friends. It tries again and again. And even though 682 swears and threatens it, something in that goo clearly gets through. Fans love Tickle Monster for another reason. There's a popular theory that it's the child of the Scarlet King, a super evil monster god, which again, we'll talk about it later in the last tier. In some stories, the king has 7 children, all evil, except the 7th. That one is pure good, maybe meant to save the world from its father. Fans point out that 999 is 666 upside down, the sign of evil turned into good. So while the Foundation is usually about locking up monsters, they treat 999 like a friend. It's a reminder that there's hope and joy, even in a world full of fear. Some even think 999 might one day save everyone. Level 2. Creepy or strange. The Administrator. Remember when I said the O5 Council answers to someone else? Yeah, this is that someone. The Administrator is the SCP Foundation's final mystery, the one figure even the O5s won't question. In some stories, they follow his orders without hesitation. In others, they don't even know who he is. That's the level we're dealing with. Here's what's on record, sort of. Some documents say the Administrator has been around since the Foundation began, quietly guiding everything from the shadows. Others claim it's a rotating title, only activated when reality starts to collapse, which honestly feels like every other week these days. Whoever, or whatever they are, the Administrator sits at the absolute top. No face, no name, just the occasional memo signed the Administrator. No one knows where they're sent from, or how they override even level 5 clearance. They just appear. In-universe rumors go hard. Some say the Administrator is immortal, quietly aging while the world burns. Others describe their strange abilities, resistance to time warps, memory erasure, even reality glitches. A few internal notes mention anomalous traits consistent across every known Administrator, like slowed aging or immunity to timeline changes. So, naturally, there are theories spiraling from there. Maybe there's been a line of administrators, each chosen when things get too dangerous for human hands. Or maybe it's a failsafe seat. If the O5s get wiped out, the next person who claims a title becomes god tier overnight. Then you get the wildcard theories. The administrator isn't real, just a mask one of the O5s wears when they need deniability. Or he is real, but not human. More like a deity wearing a foundation badge, nudging events from the start. Fans love calling him the man behind the curtain. But when it comes to official files, the line never changes. The true nature or identity of the administrator remains unknown. And that's probably the most honest thing the Foundation's ever published. Pattern Screamers. It starts as a blank test page. Nothing but placeholder code on the Foundation's website. Meant for back-end testing. Never meant to be seen. Then one day, someone scrolls through it and finds a line buried in the text. But worst of all, you ignore us. We scream, and you do nothing. And suddenly, this isn't just a test page anymore. People start noticing more lines of furious broken messages laced through the HTML. Not glitches, not spam. Just rage, desperation, grief. It feels like something is trapped inside the code and it's very aware we're watching. They're called pattern screamers. Not people, not creatures. More like sentient fragments, like emotions, memories, and voices that somehow slipped through the cracks of reality and got lodged into data. They talk about being torn from their homes, flung into the blank space between stories. They accuse the Foundation of forgetting them. They blame us, the readers, for doing nothing. And they don't whisper. They scream. Look into our eyes, you miserable wretch. Are you still laughing? It's like the page itself is furious. Basically, a tech support ticket from hell. Or if you prefer, just another Tuesday on Twitter. In one of SCP-Wiki's story, a researcher named Rosen makes the test page, but he thinks the weird text is just a glitch or a bad joke. His boss, Director Winters, isn't amused. He wants Rosen to clean up the page, but while they argue, the pattern screamers keep yelling, mixing in their pain and anger with every new update. Some theories say pattern screamers are leftovers from destroyed universes, like scraps of forgotten timelines that somehow stayed conscious. Others think they're raw emotion that's metastasized into code. Either way, they don't want containment. They want to be heard. And you can't trap them. You can't see them. They live in the structure of the database itself. SCP-1529, King of the Mountain. Imagine this. You're climbing Mount Everest, and you've already passed the point where normal rules don't apply. Up here, the air's so thin your brain forgets how to brain. It's called the death zone for a reason. Most people who visit it don't stick around for long, but something or someone does. SCP-1529 is known as the King of the Mountain. Although King is maybe giving him too much credit. He's just a man, or at least that's what he looks like. Heavy parka, snow goggles, the kind of boots you'd expect on a serious mountaineer. Nothing too weird at first glance. But here's the thing, he only appears to climbers who are in real trouble. If you're exhausted, freezing, or half delirious, he's suddenly there, standing just close enough for you to notice. And instead of doing something terrifying, he saves people. Sometimes it's food. Sometimes it's a warm drink. Sometimes just a steady voice that reminds you not to give up. Some climbers swear he walked with them all the way down. Others don't remember the descent at all. They just wake up at base camp, alive. But not everyone. Sometimes he just watches climbers collapse right in front of him, and no one knows why. There's no clear pattern. He's helped solo climbers and left behind groups. He's saved experts and ignored rookies. People wonder, does he only help those who accept his presence? Is there some invisible test? Or does he already know who can make it and who won't? Try to take his pictures and you'll get camera glitch, vanished footage, GPS goes haywire. It's like the mountain itself wants to keep him a secret. The Sherpas have their own stories. Some say he's a lost climber who never left. Others speak about a guardian spirit watching over the mountain's dead. A few call him a hallucination, but the problem is he's too consistent to be fake, too weird to be real. The Foundation doesn't try to contain him. They just log sightings and monitor the area. So far, he hasn't broken any laws of physics too aggressively. No mind control, no teleportation, no dead rising from the snow. Just a man who appears when it matters most. But one thing's clear. He's not random. He's waiting for something. And until someone figures out what, the King of the Mountain remains exactly where he's always been. But here's the thing about wanting to save people. It can be a blessing or a curse. There's this anomaly who's also obsessed with saving humanity. But his saving means transforming you into something far, far worse. We'll talk more about it in Level 3. SCP-166, Teenage Succubus, Daughter of the Goddess. So, imagine being a teenage girl. Except your mom might be a fertility goddess, and every guy who comes near you turns into a total simp. That's life for SCP-166. The Foundation calls her the teenage succubus, but that sounds mean. She's not evil, she's just cursed. She grew up in a quiet convent, far from people, raised by nuns who hoped the peace and quiet would help. But it didn't, because her curse always finds a way. If a man spends time near her, it doesn't end well. They get obsessed fast. One guy nearly burned down the whole building trying to save her. Another had a full breakdown. Some won't even leave her room unless they're dragged out. Now the rules are strict. No male staff. No exceptions. But here's the thing. She's not trying to hurt anyone. She doesn't want this. She just wants a normal life. Go outside. Talk to someone without making them write weird love poems. The Foundation's tried stuff, like holy water, charms, therapists, but nothing works. So now they just keep her alone and hope for the best. If you ask her what she wants, she'll just say, I wish people would stop treating me like a curse. She's not a monster. She's just a girl who makes people lose their minds. SCP-4158. Big Charlie. Big Charlie looks like a giant cow, but not the kind you'd see on a farm. Charlie is skinny, pale, and you can see his bones and veins under his skin. He's taller than most cars and just keeps growing, no matter what anyone does. That's right, Charlie can't stop growing. His body makes more and more meat, bones, and even extra parts that shouldn't be there. So the people at the Foundation have to cut pieces off all the time, just to stop him from getting bigger. The weird thing is, the meat isn't magic or dangerous. It's just regular meat. But honestly, would you want to eat a steak that came off a never-ending monster cow? Probably not. How did Charlie start? Well, he didn't come from a normal birth. He literally exploded out of a pregnant cow at a slaughterhouse, which freaked everyone out. The workers tried to kill him, but it never worked. You can shoot him, cut him, burn him. He just healed right back. Instead of calling for help, the owner, Jeff Fine, tried to turn Charlie into a moneymaker. He even started a weird cult, treating Charlie like a god and doing creepy rituals to get more meat. Yeah, not a great business plan. Soon, things got too weird. Charlie escaped and the cult went crazy, and the Foundation had to step in. They cleaned up the mess, erased everyone's memories, and built a special pen to hold Charlie. Now, every week, the staff cut off the new meat and burn it all. They don't want anyone trying to eat it or sell it again. There's still a big question nobody can answer. Was Charlie a natural anomaly or a made one? The original pregnant cow was bought from someone mysterious. Nobody knows who. SCP-4001, Library of Alexandria. This isn't the library you heard about in school. SCP-4001 is way stranger. It's an endless library hidden under the sands of Egypt, where space and time don't really make sense anymore. It's massive. You could walk for days and end up back where you started. The place is stacked with shelves in every direction. If IKEA gives you a headache, this would make you cry. Here's the wild part. Every book in this library is a whole person's life. Anyone you can think of, and tons you can't. Some books are about people who lived 75,000 years ago, back when fire was the hottest new thing. A few are just labeled the baby, or some weird symbol. And here's where it gets creepy. Some books aren't history, they're the future. There are stories here that haven't even happened yet. If you could read your own story ahead of time, would you? Or would knowing your ending just prove everything is set in stone? That's the kind of thing that keeps Foundation researchers up at night. It gets even weirder. In one log, an agent meets an ancient watcher, or SCP-4001-1. He's guarded the place for so long, he's never even heard the Romans fell. He talks like a legend, frozen in time, just waiting for someone to show up and read. The Foundation treats this place like a live bomb. The entrance looks like a boring concrete bunker, but it's loaded with failsafes. Not that it matters. SCP-4001 mostly looks after itself. Maybe it's just waiting for the right reader, or the story's last page. And if you're wondering if the Foundation can read the future now, well, that's the big question, isn't it? Maybe they're running the show, or maybe they're just following a script. But if you think an endless library is strange, there's a rumor that the very fabric of space, every hallway, and every never-ending corridor might all trace back to a tiny object. Up next, SCP-184, The Architect, SCP-01 Theory. Earlier, when we talked about the clockworks twisting reality, I teased an object that might be the true source of every endless hallway and too big to be real anomaly. This is it. This is the thing that might be behind every endless hallway and maze the Foundation ever found. It looks like a weird little ball. Nothing fancy. But if you put it inside a building, everything goes crazy. At first, the rooms just get bigger. Leave it alone longer and new hallways pop up out of nowhere. Give it time and you'll start finding doors that go nowhere. Wooden microwaves or bookshelves with glass pages. The building turns into an endless, broken maze. Even if you take SCP-184 out, all those weird rooms stay. The Foundation learned this the hard way, so now they keep it outside, strapped to a giant magnet like a boring art piece. If a building even starts growing the wrong way, they don't mess around. Either they destroy it or lock it up. Now, for the wild theory, some fans and even Foundation staff think SCP-184 is actually the real SCP-01. Like, it's the original mistake, the thing that's been stretching the universe since day one. Maybe that's why our world is so full of weirdness. Endless halls, broken rooms, stuff that make no sense. Maybe our whole universe is just one giant SCP-184 accident, always expanding. New rooms showing up with every glitch. Pocket dimensions and impossible spaces are maybe just more of the architect's mess. There's even a story where Foundation explorers push past the edge of reality and find all kinds of broken worlds. Cities made of poker chips, oceans of acid, planets that look like machines. Everything's off. Like SCP-184 got loose and nobody hit stop. So yeah, if the world feels too weird sometimes, maybe it is. Maybe we're all stuck inside one never-ending SCP experiment, and nobody can fix it. Level 3. Noticeably disturbing. SCP-173. The Sculpture. SCP-173 is literally the granddaddy of the SCP universe. It's the very first SCP. It's the original. The one that set the mood for everything else on the site. At first, it just looks like a chunky concrete statue covered in spray paint, standing in a locked cell. But the weirdness starts as soon as you try to leave it alone. Here's the rule. If nobody's watching, it moves fast. Look away for even a second and it rushes across the room. Its specialty is snapping necks. That's why the Foundation sends in teams, so someone's always watching while the other blinks. Slip up and you're gone. What really messes with people is how little we know. There's no history, no backstory, no hints about where it came from. The official file just says how to keep it contained, and even that feels like it's barely enough. Fans call it the Peanut, because yeah, it sort of looks like one. Not too scary until you're in the same room. If you've played SCP Containment Breach, you know about the blink mechanic. You have to manage your blinks, like you're playing a dangerous staring contest with something that really wants you dead. Let me clarify though, the original image used for 173 was an actual sculpture by a Japanese artist. When the site got hit with copyright claims, they took the image down. Fans joke that 173 changed its appearance after a breach. You know, just to keep things extra uncomfortable. By the way, the sculpture isn't the only one that loves a good chase. There's another entity, one with a very different motivation in level 4. Imagine a tall, pale figure who will track you down anywhere in the world, all because you made a mistake of looking at his face. They call him the Shy Guy. He doesn't care how far you run. He will come for you, and you'll hear his scream long before he reaches you. SCP-49. The Plague Doctor. Earlier, we met the King of the Mountain, who helps climbers near death. SCP-49, the Plague Doctor, also believes he's helping, but his methods are terrifying. Imagine an old-timey doctor in black robes with a creepy bird mask wandering around talking about the pestilence. He's polite, even gentle. He'll greet you, ask how you're feeling, maybe even apologize, but get in his way or question his cure, and things get ugly fast. Here's the problem. The Plague Doctor's cure is fatal. One touch and you're done. He claims you're infected, even if you're in perfect health, and then proceeds with his version of surgery. To clarify, this is not the sort of home remedy your grandma would recommend. The Plague Doctor isn't a monster who rages. He's calm. He'll talk for hours about his mission, how important it is, and how nobody understands him. Sometimes you can almost feel sorry for him. He seems sad about what he does, but that never stops him. Every time there's a breach, another unlucky staff member gets cured. And the craziest part? No one knows what the pestilence is. Maybe it's a disease only he sees. Maybe it's all in his head after centuries locked away. The Foundation keeps testing, keeps listening, but the answers never come. Just more empty bodies and sad apologies. But there's a place even the doctor wouldn't dare to visit. A forest where the wrong word can twist reality and your fate. Where every sentence could be your last. That's what we talk about next. SCP-4000. Taboo. The Nameless Forest. Remember when your parents said there were words you just shouldn't say? In SCP-4000, keeping quiet isn't just good manners. It's survival. This is the Nameless Forest. The Foundation calls it taboo, but that barely covers it. Its name changes every time you talk about it. Actually, everything changes. Names, objects, even your memories. Researchers follow strict rules in this forest. Never use your real name. Never call things what they are. Always talk around it. If you see a tree, you say the tall thing with branches. It sounds ridiculous, but if someone slips up, the result is, well, Let's just say the debriefing forums are mostly classified, but there are rumors. People who break the rules come back wrong. They forget their names, or worse, start swapping identities with things in the forest. Some others vanish completely, either absorbed by the woods or by whatever listens when you say the wrong thing. Here's the creepiest part. There's a story about a researcher who tried to call out to a lost friend by name. The forest made two versions of his friend. One turned into a tree and one wasn't. Nobody could agree which was real, and soon, nobody knew who anyone was. Even so, the Foundation keeps sending people in. Sometimes to rescue lost staff, sometimes to trade with the forest's strange residents. But the problem is, every visit changes you a bit. Some people say the only way out is to forget who you were. Others say you never really leave at all. SCP-407, the Song of Genesis. Remember the succubus, whose very presence could change someone's mind? The Song of Genesis does the same, but for every living cell. Some music helps you relax. Other songs get stuck in your head. But SCP-407 isn't just a song. It's something much stranger, and a whole lot more dangerous. The Foundation calls it the Song of Genesis. Nobody knows who made it, but everybody who hears it learns very quickly that it can't be put in Spotify. SCP-407 is an audio file. It's about 20 minutes long, and at first, it sounds peaceful. People who listen say it reminds them of soft chanting, and a little bit of flute or bird song in the background. But here's the thing. If you play the song anywhere near living things like plants, animals, and people, they start to grow fast. At first, this sounds like a miracle. Their wounds heal, sick people get better, even dead grass springs back to life. But it doesn't stop there. If the song keeps playing, the growth doesn't stop either. The cells split and multiply out of control. Plants get huge and start twisting around the room. People who listen too long aren't just healed. They start turning into biological projects. Their bodies become something else. A mess of new tissues, fungus, roots, and strange lumps that used to be arms and legs. It gets worse. In Foundation tests, a simple room with plants, moss, or even a person inside can turn into a thick jungle in just a few minutes if the song is playing. The listeners can't move or talk once the song really gets going. Instead, they just get swallowed up by the wild growth. The Foundation found SCP-407 by accident. Some old files say it was part of a bigger project, but most of the history is classified. Now the file is kept locked away. The only way to play it is with permission, and even then, only in special rooms where nothing living can hear it. That includes plants and tiny bugs, anything with cells that can grow. The staff even wears special suits just to be safe. Nobody knows where the song came from or what language it's in. Some people think it's ancient, or maybe even something not from this world. The words don't match any known language, and even computers can't figure it out. The only thing that's certain is that this is not a song you ever want to play by mistake. SCP-579, the Nameless Horror. Nobody really knows what SCP-579 is. The Foundation doesn't even try to pretend. If you open its file, you get no photos, no details, black bars, blank spaces, and warnings that basically scream, "Don't ask." Here's what they let slip. SCP-579 is locked away in a secret room, and nobody, seriously, nobody knows what's actually in there. Even high-level staff avoid the area. The rules? Don't open the door, don't peek inside, don't even try to find out more. But if you get close, weird things will happen to you. Some people report headaches, dizziness, and sudden panic, like their brain wants out before they see something they can't handle. Even the toughest Foundation agents make excuses to stay far away. The Foundation does random checks on the chamber, but the main job is just to make sure nobody tampers with it. Basically, the safest plan is to leave it alone and not ask questions. And if someone really tries to dig for answers, that's when things get dangerous. There are cases where staff just vanish, or start acting like they've seen something that shouldn't exist. Most people figure 579 isn't just some monster or strange object. Some say it's worse, a thing that can't be explained, a weapon gone wrong, or maybe a mistake that should have stayed buried. The only rule that matters, don't look for answers you can't handle. And if you do, the Foundation won't save you. They'll pretend they never knew your name. Level 4. Very disturbing. SCP-343. God. Some anomalies are famous for their danger, but SCP-343 stands out for the exact opposite reason. He just seems pleasant. In fact, the first thing the Foundation noticed is that he walked into containment on his own, smiled at security, and introduced himself as God. No dramatic entrance, no lightning. Just a calm, older man who's happy to answer questions. If it wasn't for the paperwork, most staff would probably just call him Grandpa. Here's where it gets interesting. The Foundation has tested him in every way they know. He passes through walls, opens locked doors, and can appear anywhere he wants and at any time. Sometimes he disappears for days, only to reappear in his cell with a news story about visiting old friends or seeing the world. The security footage never catches him leaving, but he's just gone. The Foundation's interview logs are a goldmine of existential crises. 343 will talk about history, science, and philosophy, often referencing events that nobody else could possibly know. Sometimes he gives answers that sound profound. Other times he's just delightfully vague. For example, when asked about his powers, he usually just shrugs and says, "Well, I am who I am." SCP-343 never seems interested in using his abilities to hurt anyone. He's polite to a fault, never raises his voice, and always asks if staff want to join him for tea. Some researchers actually look forward to interviewing him, because he's the only anomaly who won't ruin your week or try to break containment. There are even rumors that he knows all the Foundation's secrets, but he keeps quiet. Of course, there's always the possibility that it's all an act. Maybe 343 just enjoys messing with people. Or maybe he really is God, and he's just waiting for the right moment to press reset. The Foundation's official stance is observe, don't provoke, which, considering their track record, is probably wise. But while 343 prefers philosophical debates and cookies to chaos, the Foundation can never quite relax around him. After all, if you had God sitting in a cell down the hall, wouldn't you check the security cameras twice? SCP-939, with many voices. SCP-939 is exactly the reason some people never answer calls from unknown numbers, or why some of us never leave the lights off. Imagine a huge, red, dog-shaped lizard with no eyes, no fur, and a mouth that could give you nightmares for a week. It doesn't hunt by sight. It hunts by sound, which means you could be hiding under a desk, holding your breath, and if you so much as sneeze, you're probably on the menu. But that's not even the worst part, because here's where things get weird. SCP-939 can mimic human speech, not just words, but entire conversations. It remembers voices and repeats things it's heard before. It could call for help, beg for mercy, or repeat the last words of its previous victims. You see, when you're alone in the dark and you hear your best friend's voice asking for help, you want to believe it's real. But that's exactly how 939 gets you. Foundation logs show that these things love to play with their food. For example, they'll use phrases like, "I need help," or "come closer," or, for maximum nightmare fuel, your own name. The first time a containment breach happened, security found a whole team chasing what they thought was a missing guard. Turns out it was just 939 baiting them in. 939 isn't evil in the mustache-twirling villain sense. It's just a predator, one that's evolved, or maybe was designed to turn trust into a death sentence. The staff are told not to respond to anything they hear in the dark. There are even reports that 939 can imitate specific people, down to favorite catchphrases or inside jokes, which means if it ever learns to say it's just a prank, bro, you're probably not getting out. But there's another monster that doesn't even need tricks. It slips silently through walls, grabs its victims, and drags them screaming into a dark, rotting dimension where no one ever escapes. SCP-106, the Old Man. They call him the Old Man. And if you're picturing some kindly grandpa, you're way off. Imagine the world's most decrepit corpse, soaked in tar, wearing the world's worst grin. 106 can pass through solid walls, corrode metal with a touch, and disappear into thin air whenever he feels like it. But the worst part isn't the smell, the slime, or the bone-chilling silence he leaves behind. It's what he does to his victims. If he gets you, you're not just dead. He'll drag you into his pocket dimension, a nightmare world of rust, shadows, and endless agony. Foundation staff have a saying: if 106 breaches containment, run. Don't be a hero, just run. But here's the interesting part. Nobody really knows why he does this. He doesn't talk, doesn't bargain, doesn't even seem angry. He's just there, waiting. 106 wasn't always a monster. Before he was the Old Man, he was just a soldier, a young, stubborn guy imprisoned in a prisoner of war camp like Gulag. The guards tried everything to break him: starvation, torture, psychological games. For a while, it looked like they might win, but the kid just wouldn't die. Every day, he held on, outlasting everyone else who gave up. Eventually, he slowly snapped. He stopped speaking, stopped eating. He just endured, like he was waiting for the world to catch up with his misery. And when the guards finally checked his cell, he was gone. All that remained was a sense of rot and decay, the kind that seeps into the walls and never really washes out. The Foundation's best guess is that something about that suffering twisted him, transforming the young man into the predator known as SCP-106. SCP-96, the Shy Guy. Remember the sculpture's deadly game of tag? The Shy Guy takes the concept even further. With him, it isn't just about not blinking. It's about never, ever seeing what you shouldn't. If you're even a little curious with this guy, you're already in danger. There are stories in the Foundation files about entire teams getting wiped out because someone, somewhere, accidentally captured his face with satellite. SCP-96, better known as the Shy Guy. He's famous for one rule, and it's brutally simple. Never look at his face. Not in person, not in a photo, not even on a blurry security cam. Because the second you do, that's it. Game over. Here's the basic rundown. 96 is a tall, unnaturally thin humanoid, pale as a ghost and twice as unsettling. You might think he'd be easy to ignore, but unfortunately, you don't have to meet him to have a problem. All it takes is catching a glimpse of his face, anywhere, anytime. Once that happens, he goes from sobbing in his cell to sprinting toward you at breakneck speed. Distance doesn't matter. He'll find you. Like a certain snail, except this time, the thing chasing you isn't slow, and you're definitely not laughing. You could be on another continent, hiding in a submarine, or chilling at Comic-Con dressed as Batman. He will get to you. Now here's where things get truly disturbing. Before he catches up to you, 96 lets out an unholy scream, then launches into a rage so intense he'll rip through doors, armored vehicles, and, most importantly, any hope Foundation cleanup crews had for an easy work week. Once he arrives, the results are always the same. Total, gruesome annihilation of the person who saw his face. Afterward, 96 sits down, gets quiet again, and waits for the next unlucky soul. You might be thinking, why not just keep him in the dark? The Foundation tried that. They keep him in a sealed, windowless box, with constant surveillance and every photo or video file under lock and key. But accidents happen. Files get mixed up. Someone opens the wrong email. Suddenly, you're on the clock. There are theories, of course. Maybe he was made this way. Maybe he's the universe's worst answer to, what if Medusa was just really, really sad? But ultimately, 96 is a walking, screaming reminder that sometimes curiosity really does kill the cat. And no amount of satisfaction is going to bring it back. SCP-682. Hard to destroy reptile. This guy isn't shy like the previous guy. He's dangerous because he hates you. Actually, he hates everyone and everything, including the furniture. The Foundation calls him the hard to destroy reptile. It's a massive, vaguely crocodilian creature covered in thick, armored scales and radiating the kind of aggression you'd expect from a lizard that never got his morning coffee. But here's the thing. 682 is smart. He learns, he adapts, and he never stops looking for a way out. Over the years, the Foundation has tried everything short of dropping him into the sun. Acid baths, incinerators, high explosives, biological weapons, you name it. They've wasted the budget on it. Yet every time 682 survives. Sometimes he even grows stronger or comes back with a new trick, just to keep the staff on their toes. There's an infamous experiment log where the Foundation, in a moment of either desperation, tried to pit 682 against other anomalies. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. SCP-173, the moving statue, didn't even faze him. When they pit him against a Shy Guy, that was a disaster for both parties. And now there's a whole section of the building that's just off limits. Now, if you remember the Tickle Monster, you know the story. They put 999, the happiest blob in the world, in with 682. And it actually worked. For a few minutes, 682 laughed. He rolled around, played, acted like a giant, happy puppy. Then, just like that, he went right back to hating everything. Even pure happiness couldn't last long. Only 682 could turn a playdate with living joy into a tantrum. You might be wondering why the Foundation doesn't just let him go. The answer is simple. He doesn't want freedom. He wants to wipe out everything. Nobody really knows what made him this angry, but he takes it out on anything that moves. What really keeps people up at night is that 682 seems to hold a grudge. He remembers faces, patterns, and even Foundation staff. There are rumors he communicates with other anomalies, or at least understands them on some level. One handler once joked that 682 was like a Reddit user with scales. Petty, vindictive, and always holding on to receipts. So, in short, if you want to see the SCP Foundation at their most desperate, check the logs for 682. You'll find a lot of failed ideas, destroyed labs, and the quiet sense that nobody really knows what to do, except keep buying more acid. SCP-1. Major proposals. The Gate Guardian, the factory, etc. SCP-1 isn't one object or creature. It's the biggest mystery in the Foundation by design. The top bosses didn't want anyone, even their own agents, to know the real story. So they made a bunch of possible files, called the 001 proposals, each claiming to be the truth, behind SCP-1. If you go looking, you'll find a giant warning at the top saying you could die just from reading about it. It's all about keeping everyone in the dark. So, what is SCP-1 really? Nobody knows for sure. The proposals all tell a different story. One of the most famous is The Factory. This file says the Foundation was born in a monstrous factory in the 1800s. The place was run by a man named Mr. Anderson, who used dark rituals and brutal magic to make supernatural things. Workers were sacrificed to keep the magic running. Eventually, the people who would later become the Foundation stormed the place, cut a deal with the living heart of the factory, and agreed to keep feeding it bodies. Hence why D-class prisoners still get sent into danger. They saved the world, but the cost was a guilty, bloody secret at the Foundation's core. Another big proposal is Gate Guardian. In this story, SCP-1 is a massive sword-wielding angel standing guard near the Tigris-Euphrates. The angel burns anything that gets too close, and can't be stopped by any weapon. Some think it's the biblical Guardian of Eden, keeping something much worse locked away. The only word it's ever spoken is "forgive me," which just makes the whole thing even more haunting. There's also When the Day Breaks. In this scenario, SCP-1 is the end of the world itself. The sun changes, and anyone touched by sunlight melts into living sludge. Creatures that just want to drag others into their nightmare. There's no fixing this one, just surviving as long as you can. Other proposals throw out even wilder ideas. Some say SCP-1 is a machine god, or a reality-bending database, or a demon king called the Scarlet King. Every theory is different, and nobody can say for sure which, if any, were true. Maybe that's the point. The Foundation would rather drown us in secrets and lies than let anyone figure out what's really behind SCP-1. And in a world this strange, maybe it's safer that way. SCP-3000, Ananta Shesha. Imagine a sea monster so big, nobody even knows how long it really is. That's SCP-3000. People call it Ananta Shesha, after the endless serpent from Hindu legends. But in the SCP world, it's a massive eel hiding deep in the Bay of Bengal, maybe hundreds of kilometers long. The Foundation has seen parts of it, sometimes a head, sometimes a long body, but nobody's seen all of it at once. SCP-3000 barely moves. Most of the time, it just lies in the dark ocean, almost like it's sleeping. But the scary part isn't what it does with its body. It's what it does to your mind. Anybody who gets close to the eel, like divers or submarine crews, starts to feel really strange. First, it's fear, then panic, then confusion, and then you start forgetting things. Some people even start seeing things that aren't there. Some fall into a trance and stop answering their radios. In the worst case, SCP-3000 will suddenly lunge forward and eat someone whole. Sometimes the person keeps transmitting for a few moments after getting swallowed. That part is truly disturbing. But here's why the Foundation puts up with it. SCP-3000 makes a special gray slime called Y909. This slime is really important because it's the main ingredient for the Foundation's best memory-erasing drugs, called amnestics. These drugs are what the Foundation uses to make people forget about monsters, ghosts, and other SCPs. Amnestics made with Y909 are much safer and last longer than the old versions. They're so good that people almost never remember what happened, even years later. But there's a problem. SCP-3000 only makes this slime after it eats a person, usually a D-class, which means a prisoner. After SCP-3000 feeds, it goes quiet for a couple of hours. During that time, special dive teams rush to its head and collect the Y909 before the eel wakes up again. It's very dangerous. Divers can lose their minds or get eaten too if they aren't careful. Still, the Foundation keeps doing it because they need Y909 to keep the world safe from secrets. Some scientists in the Foundation wonder if SCP-3000 is eating more than just flesh. Maybe it's feeding on people's minds or even their souls. That would explain why people nearby feel so confused or forgetful. There's something sad and scary about it. The same eel that eats your memories is helping the Foundation make others forget, too. SCP-3000 is special because the Foundation isn't just locking it away. They're actually using it. Officially, it's called Thaumiel class, which means it helps the Foundation, even if it's a nightmare. Level 5. God forgive me. SCP-2845. The Deer. If you ever wondered what would happen if a cosmic horror wore antlers, look no further. SCP-2845, better known as the Deer, is the kind of anomaly that makes everyone in the Foundation's ritual department sweat through their lab coats. Forget Rudolph, this one doesn't just guide slays. It could rewrite reality with a look. Let's start with the basics. SCP-2845 looks like a massive 6-horned deer. But that's where the nature documentary stuff ends. It suddenly appeared in Greenland, destroyed a coal mine, and then transforming people and objects into chemically complex objects, causing weather anomalies and making the town nearby a focal point for international media before the Foundation intervened. Nobody knows where it came from. Maybe another dimension, or maybe a failed science project. What's special about the deer isn't just its appearance. It warps reality around itself, and the only thing keeping it from breaking loose is a containment ritual so complicated it would make a Catholic priest give up. We're talking candles, salt circles, chanting, costumes, the whole 9 yards. And if the ritual slips even once, 2845 starts transforming everything nearby into strange, impossible shapes. Concrete becomes citrus fruit. People become cubes of frozen gas. And occasionally, the color orange decides to just not mean orange anymore. So what's the Foundation's solution? Build an entire facility around 2845, staffed with people who do nothing but memorize and perform rituals day and night. If someone misses a step, even by a second, all bets are off. Some poor interns have nightmares about dropping the wrong colored candle. To put it simply, nobody wants to be the reason the world ends because we messed up the deer dance. If that sounds excessive, keep in mind that every previous attempt to kill or move 2845 has failed spectacularly. Missiles, poison, even nuclear weapons, but nothing leaves a scratch. In fact, trying to harm it usually makes the rituals harder, or just causes more chaos. Some Foundation staff whisper that 2845 is a god, or maybe an exile from somewhere far worse. Others think it's proof that the universe really is run by a committee, one with a twisted sense of humor and a fondness for antlers. But the truth doesn't really matter, as long as everyone keeps lighting the candles and praying nothing goes wrong. SCP-2317, a door to another world. Some SCPs are scary because of what they do. SCP-2317 is scary because of what might happen if anyone makes a mistake. At first, it just looks like an old wooden door in the middle of an empty room. But this door is actually the one thing standing between us and something so big and dangerous it could end everything. Behind the door is a place the Foundation calls another world, but nobody's really sure what it really is. All they know is that it's home to something they call the Devourer of Worlds, a huge being that's chained up and kept out of our world by a handful of weak links and a bunch of strange rituals. Every day, Foundation staff perform the same routine, lighting candles, drawing chalk circles, reading from old books, and repeating steps exactly as written. They don't really know why it works. They just know that if they stop, the chains get weaker. And here's the thing, the chains are already breaking. According to the Foundation's own files, the rituals are less and less effective every year. The door is starting to crack. Sometimes staff hear rumbling, voices, or even the floor shake. There's a feeling of pressure, like the world itself is holding its breath. The Foundation tries to keep everyone calm. The official story is that everything is under control, and as long as the rules are followed, we'll all be fine. But if you read between the lines, it's clear the Foundation is just hoping for the best. If the last chain breaks and the Devourer gets out, it's over. Not just for the Foundation, but for the world. Nobody knows where the Devourer came from. Some people think it's a punishment for something humanity did a long time ago. Others say it's just a monster that got trapped here by accident. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that every day, staff show up and do the rituals and hope they're not too late. But imagine an anomaly that doesn't just threaten the world. It threatens reality itself. It knows it's inside a story and can rewrite anything, even your memories, with just a thought. SCP-3812, a voice behind me. If you ever wondered how weird SCPs can get, SCP-3812 is as deep as it goes. Once, 3812 was just a regular guy named Sam Howell. He died in 1996 and was buried, but that wasn't the end. Sam came back to life, but not as a normal human. He changed. He became something the Foundation could barely understand. Now, SCP-3812 doesn't really have a true form. Sometimes it looks like a person, but that changes all the time. What 3812 actually does is even stranger. It can change reality itself, whenever and however it wants. If it doesn't want the Foundation to find it, it can simply erase the people who were searching for it, or even erase the whole search ever happening. Most people don't even notice reality has shifted. Sometimes people just vanish, and nobody even remembers them. The Foundation can't contain SCP-3812. The best they can do is watch from far away and try to keep people from getting too close. There's a group assigned to follow its movements, but the truth is, 3812 can go anywhere, at any time. Its powers go way beyond what anyone can handle. But here's where it gets really wild. SCP-3812 doesn't just change the world, it's starting to realize it's a character in a story, like someone in a comic book who knows they're being drawn. And it's not just one layer. It realizes there's a story about the story, and a story about that story, going up forever. Each time 3812 ascends, it understands a little more, but also loses its grip on what's real. For 3812, every step up is like going from a 2D cartoon into 3D, then into 4D, and so on. The higher it goes, the less it understands, and the more it hears the voices of authors and narrators above him. That's where the name comes from, a voice behind me. When Sam Howell was alive, he had schizophrenia and heard voices. Now, those voices are real. He actually hears voices from higher realities, maybe even from whoever's out there writing his story right now. The story turns deeply sad and unsettling. 3812 is losing his mind as he climbs reality's ladder, and he can never stop. Sometimes he tries to help people by erasing their suffering, but really he just deletes them from existence. In the file, there's a moment when a Foundation scientist, Dr. Yamamara, realizes even he might be a story. At the end, Yamamara writes in terror, "It's seen us." The idea is that 3812 may one day reach our level, and if he does, he could rewrite or erase our world without us ever knowing. SCP-231, The Seven Brides. The Seven Brides is one of the most infamous and debated stories in the Foundation. People still argue about it on forums, and honestly, for good reason. It starts with 7 girls, each kidnapped by a doomsday cult called the Children of the Scarlet King. This isn't just any cult, but one that worships a cosmic horror, a being so dangerous the Foundation treats it like a walking apocalypse, which we will talk about in more detail in the next entry. The plan was simple, but horrifying. Use the girls as vessels to bring the Scarlet King's monstrous children into our world. By the time the Foundation arrived, most of the damage had already been done. After they were brought in, the brides started dying one by one. The first was killed during the Foundation's initial attempt to recover the group. She gave birth to something unnatural and didn't survive. The second died on an operating table when Foundation doctors tried to remove her fetus, but the procedure triggered a disaster. The third couldn't take the psychological strain anymore and ended her own life in containment. The fourth died after Foundation staff tried to expel her fetus using an SCP pill, SCP-500, but the remains caused another deadly reaction, killing her and others. The fifth died after the Foundation's daily ritual failed. She gave birth just an hour later. The resulting birth unleashed another apocalyptic event. What kind, the Foundation doesn't say, but records showed that reality itself seemed to bend. Some researchers were never found, and the incident log only lists them as lost to the anomaly. The sixth was killed during an escape attempt. Foundation staff tried to save her, but both she and the agent died, unleashing yet another catastrophe. So now, only one, SCP-231-7, is left. The Foundation's solution is brutal. She's kept chained to a hospital bed in a soundproof cell, never sedated, never left alone. Her food and fluids come by IV, and there's only one thing that keeps the world safe, a daily event called Procedure 110, Montauk. Nobody outside the highest ranks knows exactly what this ritual involves. All the details are redacted, and every staff member who's ever been involved is under strict orders not to speak about it. The official file admits, Procedure 110 Montauk is as horrible as you've heard. That's about as close as the Foundation gets to a confession. What is actually happening in there? The Foundation rotates in 6 Class D personnel every day. These aren't just any prisoners. These are people picked for obedience, who've been through psychological screening and have explosive collars on just in case. If a D-class doesn't come back from the procedure, their collar detonates. There's no anesthesia, no mercy. The staff aren't even allowed to comfort her, and any sympathy is grounds for immediate removal, or worse. The entry doesn't spell out the details. Most readers and fans believe the ritual involves extreme sensitive violence, but others have written fan stories where it's just psychological torment, or some kind of supernatural fear ritual. Still, the Foundation is clear about one thing. Whatever they're doing, it's the only thing standing between our world and total annihilation. Let's talk about the Scarlet King. The Scarlet King. If the SCP universe has a final boss, this is it. So who or what is the Scarlet King? He's not just a monster. He's more like a dark god, or a force of pure evil that exists outside our world. People see him as a huge, terrifying king wearing red, crowned with flames, surrounded by chaos. Sometimes he shows up as a monster with red tentacles, horns, or just as a huge shadow of hate. He doesn't really have one body. Instead, he's like a storm of bad energy that wants to break through into our world. In the stories, the Scarlet King lives in his own nightmarish dimension, always looking for a way in. If he ever breaks through, that's the end of our world. People talk about CK or XK class events, which just means goodbye world. He is the enemy of order, reality, and hope. Let's pick up where we left off from the 7 brides. That's where the king first showed up. Each bride was forced to carry the Scarlet King's child, and you already know how that goes. But the last bride is still alive, locked away under the Foundation's harshest containment. Every single day, they perform a ritual on her that's so brutal, no one even dares write down what actually happens. The reason? If the ritual ever stops, the last child might be born, and the king could finally break through. But here's the twist. Some Foundation leaders later wondered if all that pain and fear was actually making the king stronger. When they finally stopped the rituals and just treated 2317 with kindness, nothing bad happened. That made people wonder, maybe the king feeds on suffering, and by being cruel, the Foundation was helping him all along. The Scarlet King isn't just a story. He has cults, fanatics who want to bring him here. The Foundation has fought them for years, sometimes wiping out entire groups. There are hints that other SCPs are his children or his servants, like SCP-682, the unkillable reptile we talked about before. Some say he's the king's 4th son, full of pure hate. And then there's SCP-999, the tickle monster, which we already met. Lots of fans think 999 is the king's 7th child, but this one turned out pure good, a blob of hope who might one day stand against his father. That's the wild part. 999's number is literally 666 flipped. Hope against hate. The Foundation is so scared of the Scarlet King, they try to cover him up. Sometimes they even spread fake rumors, like saying SCP-2317 is the real big bad, just to keep people from learning the truth. The king is self-containing, stuck in his own dimension, for now. But the fear is always there. One day, he might break free. In fan art, he's shown as a huge demon with crowns, surrounded by blood and nightmares. Every story about ritual blood, sacrifice, or unstoppable evil points back to him. He is chaos itself, the thing behind the curtain, the reason the Foundation never truly relaxes. So, in summary, the Scarlet King is the shadow over everything in SCP. He's not in a cell, he's in the dark, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, if you think back to the tickle monster, you'll remember that in a universe built on darkness, even the smallest bit of joy might matter more than anyone realizes. Humanity's going to hell. This isn't one single SCP or secret file. It's the gut punch you get from the darkest corners of the Foundation. The sense that, no matter what, humanity's fate is just pain and misery. Sometimes it's literal. Here's how it plays out. In some stories, the world ends with a bang. In others, everything just breaks down slowly. But the real nightmare comes when the Foundation learns something so horrible, so hopeless, that the only mercy left is ending it all. Take SCP-5000. This story is famous for flipping the whole SCP universe on its head. One day, the very people meant to protect us, the Foundation, just start killing everyone. The crazy part is nobody knows what secret broke them. There's only hints, coded messages telling staff to harden your hearts, and secret files that shut people up for good. What did they find out? Most people think the answer is simple and chilling. God hates us. The universe itself wants us to suffer. Maybe the afterlife is just a torture chamber. Or maybe the Scarlet King already won and every soul is just fuel for his nightmare. It gets worse. In Dead Men, an SCP-1 story, death itself stops working. People can't die, even if their bodies rot and fall apart. Earth turns into a living hell, packed with people trapped in suffering. Maybe the afterlife is full, or maybe it's locked up, so souls just pile up with nowhere to go. Other SCPs gives us glimpses of what comes after death, and it's never good news. SCP-2718 drops the bomb that your mind might stay awake inside your corpse, stuck in endless decay forever. That's as bad as it gets, and the Foundation fights hard to keep it secret. Then there's SCP-7179. Every time someone dies, their mind is shipped off to some weird endless prison. Call it hell, call it whatever you want. It's just more proof that there's no escape. But sometimes, humanity's going to hell isn't about fire and devils. It's just about everything getting worse, with nobody able to stop it. Maybe the Scarlet King finally drags every soul into his nightmare world. Maybe the universe just grinds down to emptiness, and everyone knows what's coming. In SCP-5000, they leave it vague on purpose. Maybe the O5s learned the ugliest truth of all. God hates us, reality is wired to hurt us, and nothing good sticks around. So they decide to end everything themselves.
Because in the SCP universe, extinction is the last mercy anyone's got. The true SCP-1. You've reached the very bottom of the iceberg, so here it is. The real answer to everything. Ready? The true SCP-1 is the comment section. Yeah, the true SCP-1 are the friends we made along the way. After digging through all the cosmic horror, lost gods, and Foundation secrets, what's left? Just people sharing the stories and arguing about canon at 3 a.m. Nah, I'm just messing with you. Those are all the entries we have. See you guys in the next iceberg.
Imagine this. You stumble into a dark underground chamber and a squat, toad-like god with a potbelly swallows you whole. Its stomach can dissolve you in minutes, and there's no escaping once it decides your dinner. Welcome to the Lovecraftian entity iceberg. Tier 1, Azathoth. Azathoth is the most powerful deity in the Cthulhu mythos, the shared horror universe created by H.P. Lovecraft. It's usually called the Daemon Sultan, or the Blind Idiot God. The titles sound dumb, but the thing behind them is anything but. Physically, it doesn't look like anything you'd expect. It has no eyes, limbs, or beastly features. It's just a massive, shapeless entity, roughly the size of a star that's about to destroy anything in its path. Its power is almost unlimited. It's immortal, invincible, and can twist reality however it wants. And if it gets angry, it could create or wipe out entire worlds just by thinking. A good example of this comes from the dream quest of Unknown Kadath, where Randolph Carter learns that all existence is basically just Azathoth's dream. And if it ever wakes up, the universe pops like a soap bubble. But don't start panicking for a new dimension yet. Ancient magical spells keep it from fully using its powers or appearing in the physical world. Even with all that power, Azathoth is completely blind and has no mind of its own. It doesn't know where it is, has no plans, and doesn't even realize it exists. It drifts at the center of the universe, where Lovecraft described its court as the very axis of madness itself. Surrounding it is a court of smaller, shapeless gods that spin endlessly, piping on flutes, pounding drums, and dancing without rhythm. That chaos is what Azathoth feeds on. And because it can't manifest fully in our world, these lesser deities act as its messengers, carrying out whatever vague plans it might accidentally have. If Azathoth ever appeared physically, the universe would be over before we even knew what hit us. Later in Tier 2, you'll meet Nyarlathotep, the Lovecraftian god who does all of Azathoth's dirty work. Yog-Sothoth. Lovecraft once described Yog-Sothoth as a congeries of glowing spheres, which in plain English means a floating cluster of glowing balls in different sizes and colors. It's not the most intimidating visual at first, but don't be fooled. This thing is one of the outer gods, and its power is way beyond human understanding. Unlike other Lovecraftian creatures that prefer causing trouble or smashing things apart, Yog-Sothoth specializes in knowing past, present, future, and every point in between. It's often called the All-in-One and One-in-All, which makes sense because it's the living embodiment of time itself. It's locked outside the universe, yet it also guards every dimensional gateway. Think of it as the gate itself, the lock, and the key all at once. Lovecraft himself describes Yog-Sothoth as the key and the gate, the guardian and the opener of the way. If you want to access forbidden dimensions, raise the dead, or bend reality, this is the entity you'd be begging to. Probably the same way you'd try summoning him at 3 a.m. when you realize your brain just isn't going to see you through that math exam. Despite being omniscient, Yog-Sothoth doesn't waste time on humanity. It doesn't care about morality, good or evil, or who's asking. But if someone insists on worshipping it, Yog-Sothoth might throw them a crumb of cosmic knowledge, which almost always results in the same thing: complete and irreversible madness. Human brains just aren't built for cosmic data dumps. Still, people never learn. In Lovecraft's story, The Dunwich Horror, a man named Wadley summoned Yog-Sothoth to impregnate his own daughter. That's the Wadleys for you. When other families were passing down recipes, they were trying to insert themselves into eldritch bloodlines. The result was twins: Wilbur Wadley, who was at least half human, and his sibling, the Dunwich Horror itself. Wilbur grew up strange but functional. His sibling grew into a vast, half-invisible monstrosity that crushed cattle, flattened farmhouses, and sent a whole town into panic. So yeah, cosmic matchmaking doesn't exactly end in happy family photos. As for Yog-Sothoth itself, it's immortal and untouchable. Physical weapons don't work, and if anyone tries, it just shifts to another dimension and leaves the attacker with a broken mind. Yog-Sothoth deals with knowledge, but later in Tier 5 we'll hit something that doesn't care about knowing. It just sings planets to death. Shub-Niggurath. When Lovecraft fans talk about cosmic horror, they usually think of Cthulhu, who you'll meet in Tier 2. But if you really want to ruin your sleep, Shub-Niggurath is the one you're looking for. Shub-Niggurath is the outer god of fertility. And while fertility usually means life and blessing, in her case, it's complicated. And you'll soon see what I mean. She used to be with Yog-Sothoth and had a whole bunch of kids for him. But now she's with Cthulhu's half-brother, Hastur. You'll also meet him in Tier 2. The takeaway from this is that even in cosmic horror, relationships don't always last. Shub-Niggurath first shows up by name in Lovecraft's 1928 story, The Last Test, though she gets more recognition in The Whisperer in Darkness, and a bunch of other mythos stories. The funny thing is, Lovecraft never really described her. That job got left to later writers, who turned her into this massive, cloudy thing covered in tentacles and mouths, all standing on goat-like legs. No, seriously, that's what they came up with. As the goddess of fertility, she's constantly giving birth. Her kids just fall out of her like it's nothing. Some of them separate completely and go do their own thing, while others can actually crawl back and reattach themselves to her. Some people's kids move back home after college, while others, well, they just fuse back into their mother's body. The ones that do make it on their own aren't exactly living it up. Not when they look the way they do. They're 12 to 20 foot tangles of tentacles with stumpy hooves, dripping green goo and carrying a stench strong enough to clear out a room. Shub-Niggurath herself hangs out in the dark between the stars, but she can travel across planets whenever she feels like it. Despite looking like the stuff of nightmares, she's one of the most worshipped outer gods. Hyperboreans, Movians, the people of Sarnath, plus druidic cults, barbaric tribes, and even non-human species all followed her. The catch is you can only summon her during a new moon. Most of the time, though, you don't deal with her directly. You deal with her kids. You sacrifice someone on a stone altar in the woods, and her children will receive the offering on her behalf. If you're not a believer, they'll probably just eat you. While they're not accepting sacrifices and eating non-believers, Shub-Niggurath's children go around the world spreading their mother's faith, which just proves that tentacled monsters can be pushy missionaries too. So what do you actually get out of worshipping Shub-Niggurath? Well, if she finds you worthy, she'll swallow you through her womb and spit you back out as a satyr-like creature with immortality. The problem is, immortality kinda loses its shine when you're stuck bleeding for the rest of eternity. But I know that's not the part you're focusing on. If she doesn't find you worthy, that's fine too. You can settle for drinking her milk and mutate into some other kind of monster. Either way, you come out different than you went in. Elder Things. Roughly 1 billion years ago, the Elder Things showed up on Earth and claimed it before anything else had the chance. Lovecraft sometimes called them the Old Ones, and they weren't exactly easy on the eyes. Picture an 8-foot barrel with starfish arms on both ends. One side worked as the head, with 5 eyes, 5 eating tubes, and shiny cilia to see in the dark, while the other was just 5 fused limbs for walking. In the middle, leathery wings stretched out, tangled with tentacles for swimming and grabbing stuff. Lovecraft said they looked part plant and part animal, which is his way of saying that they could reproduce with spores while still tearing into meat when they got hungry. They weren't immortal, but they did bleed thick green slime that smelled so bad, you could probably track one down from miles away. But their strangest feature wasn't the body, it was the brain. They had a 5-lobe design that gave them a level of intelligence far beyond anything else alive at the time. A human scientist in At the Mountains of Madness even recognized them as scientists, not monsters. Their knowledge was centuries ahead of ours, and according to Lovecraft, they may have created all life on Earth. Their biggest experiment was the Shoggoths, a slave species they engineered to build and serve. That worked fine until the Shoggoths decided they weren't interested in being slaves anymore. You'll get all the details in Tier 3. After they colonized the Earth, it wasn't just the Shoggoths they had to deal with. Over the years, they fought against the star spawn of Cthulhu, the Migo, and the great race of Yith. Combine that with the Earth's climate shifting around, and eventually, the Elder Things abandoned their surface cities and retreated underwater. Nodens. Nodens, also called the Hunter or Lord of the Great Abyss, is one of the Elder Gods, and he has a fan club made up of Night Gaunts. They worship him, which makes sense since they do most of his dirty work anyway. He usually appears as an old man with long white hair and a beard, but don't let that frail wizard look fool you. He's actually freakishly strong, and instead of a horse or a dragon, his ride of choice is a giant seashell chariot pulled by strange sea beasts. Subtle isn't really his thing. He spends most of his time in the Dreamlands, tracking down monsters that don't belong there. Regular creatures don't interest him as much, so he prefers going after the tougher targets, like servants of the Great Old Ones, or Nyarlathotep. Speaking of Nyarlathotep, the two can't stand each other. Whenever they cross paths, it usually turns into a cosmic showdown, complete with some weird Lovecraftian-style trash talk. Nodens is sometimes portrayed as benevolent, but he isn't exactly a hero. Sure, he's been known to step in and help humans here and there, but it's usually because it benefits him, not because he's out here trying to save the day. The real ace up Nodens' sleeve is his command of the Great Abyss, the Lovecraftian version of the underworld. With his night gaunts at his side, he spends a lot of time messing up the plans of the outer gods and their spawn. If the cosmic horrors were throwing a party, Nodens and his crew would be the ones who show up to shut the whole thing down. Even with all that power, Nodens isn't the boss of the elder gods. He's more like their heavy hitter, the ones they rely on when someone needs to be hunted down. Nodens hunts monsters across the Dreamlands, but down in Tier 5 you'll find a different kind of hunter. This one snacks on souls. Tier 2, Cthulhu. Cthulhu, or Cthulhu if you really want to get accurate, is the poster child of Lovecraft's universe. Even if you've never read a single line of his work, you've probably heard the name. Cthulhu first showed up in the 1928 short story called The Call of Cthulhu, and from there he became the face of the mythos. He looks like someone mashed together an octopus, a dragon, and a human, then supersized it. His head is a writhing mess of tentacles. His body's scaly. He's got wings that don't really look like they'd work, and he walks around on vaguely human arms and legs. In Lovecraft's story, one sailor described seeing him as like watching a mountain get up and walk. When Cthulhu rose from the sunken city of R'lyeh, the sailors who stumbled on him didn't exactly walk away fine. Some died outright, others went insane, and one crew had to ram their ship straight into him just to buy enough time to escape, only to watch him regenerate and keep coming at them. Cthulhu is considered one of the Great Old Ones. He's immortal, and he comes with a couple of unsettling perks. He can shapeshift, regenerate, and warp minds just by existing. Right now, he's hibernating in R'lyeh at the bottom of the ocean, waiting for the day the city rises again. Some of Lovecraft's followers have a theory that Cthulhu's slumber is tied to the stars. They say that he can only thrive when the stars are in the right position, and when they shifted out of alignment, R'lyeh sank with him, locked inside to wait it out. His followers claim that when he wakes, the world will throw laws and morals out the window. People will lose their minds, and humanity will collapse into chaos. But he's not expected to wake up on his own. His cultists insist they need to break him out with rituals and chants, which is easier said than done when your god is buried under miles of seawater. Even though he's been sleeping for who knows how long, Cthulhu has become something of a pop culture mascot. Writers expanded his story long after Lovecraft. Fans turned him into memes. Scientists named animals after him. And he even ran as a parody presidential candidate in 2010 and 2016. Not bad for a cosmic horror currently napping at the bottom of the ocean. Nyarlathotep. Imagine a stranger walking into your city one night. He's tall, dressed like a pharaoh, and promises he can show you wonders from other worlds. You go see his little science show. Next thing you know, you're having dreams that feel too real. Your grip on reality starts slipping, and by the time you notice, it's already too late. That's Nyarlathotep. He first appeared in Lovecraft's 1920 prose poem Nyarlathotep, where he's described as a dark-skinned man resembling an English pharaoh. Wherever he travels, he shows off strange, impossible devices. At first, people are impressed, but his presence doesn't just wow crowds, it unravels them. They start losing themselves, falling into his influence, and joining the growing line of followers who no longer question what's real. Unlike most of Lovecraft's gods, Nyarlathotep is very aware of himself and very hands-on. He isn't trapped in a cosmic prison or snoozing at the bottom of the ocean. He walks Earth freely, shifting into whatever form fits the occasion. One day, he looks like a regular guy. The next, he could show up as something you'll never unsee. Like your grandma at Coachella squeezed into a crop top 2 sizes too small. Technically, he's Azathoth's son, but they couldn't be more different. Nyarlathotep actively speaks to humans, manipulates them, and spreads propaganda. He also acts as a messenger for the other gods when they need someone who can actually string together a coherent sentence. And if he ever finds himself in over his head, he just runs to Daddy Azathoth, and whatever was in his way doesn't last long. Since his debut, Nyarlathotep has become one of the most frequently used figures in the mythos. He shows up in novels, comics, manga, video games, you name it. Out of all the cosmic horrors, he's the one most likely to walk right up to you, smile, and ruin your life just for the fun of it. Dagon. Dagon shows up in Lovecraft's 1990 short story, Dagon, told through the rambling account of a morphine-addicted World War I veteran. After escaping German capture, he drifted on a lifeboat and ended up in a slimy alien landscape pushed up from the ocean floor. The place was coated in rotting fish, reeked like a seafood dumpster in July, and stretched for miles. The real horror came when he stumbled across a massive stone monolith covered in aquatic carvings, figures that looked half human, half fish, with bulging eyes, webbed hands, and rubbery mouths. And then Dagon himself showed up, a gigantic, scaly amphibian humanoid with gills and fins. On a scale of 1 to whale, he's massive, which might be why he's considered one of the great old ones rather than just another fishman. Dagon is usually tied to the Deep Ones, a race of immortal amphibious beings who live in cities at the bottom of the ocean. Sometimes they surface and approach human communities with gifts of gold and fish. The offer sounds great until you realize the price. The Deep Ones demand worship, and over time, the people who accept their gifts end up sacrificing loved ones in exchange for, well, an endless supply of gold and fish. The most famous group tied to Dagon is the Esoteric Order of Dagon from Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth. The cult is run by Deep Ones who want to build up their numbers and eventually reach R'lyeh to free Cthulhu. In the meantime, they recruit humans and mix bloodlines to grow stronger. Outside Lovecraft's stories, Dagon hasn't exactly stayed underwater. He's popped up across movies, video games, manga, and even music. If you've ever watched Doctor Who or Ben 10 Ultimate Alien, you've seen versions of him under slightly different names. Apparently, being a giant fish god comes with good PR. Hastur. Hastur, better known as the King in Yellow or the Unspeakable, is one of the great old ones. He's the half-brother of Cthulhu and a spawn of Yog-Sothoth, which already tells you his family tree is a nightmare. No one actually knows what Hastur looks like. Some say he's a formless mass with octopus-like limbs. Others picture him as a humanoid in a golden robe with tentacles spilling out underneath. The tentacle theme seems to run in the family, since his half-niece Cthulhu has the same look going on. You'll hear all about her in Tier 3. Hastur first shows up in Ambrose Bierce's Haita the Shepherd as a god of shepherds who decided to flip sides and ruin everything. In that story, he tries to wipe out Midgard by possessing a magician named Grimnir, tricking orcs into fighting humans, and sneaking demons into the world to finish the job. Lovecraft later mentions him in The Whisperer of Darkness, which is what tied Hastur into the mythos. Over time, he picked up plenty of followers. The Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign worship him, and the Byakhee serve as his interstellar Uber service. So even though Hastur's true form stays a mystery, his influence shows up everywhere. Yig. Yig, also known as the Father of Serpents, is one of the great old ones. He first appeared in The Curse of Yig, and is usually described as a massive snake with arms like a man. In that story, a couple travels to Oklahoma to learn about this legendary snake deity, which of course turns out to be a bad idea. Yig is obsessively protective of his offspring, and since his children are literal snakes, harming them is the fastest way to get on his bad side. The wife made that mistake when she came across a nest of baby rattlesnakes near their camp. Because her husband was terrified of snakes, she shot them with a rifle, unknowingly putting the family on Yig's hit list. Her husband knew how dangerous that was and tried rituals to keep Yig away, but she just brushed them aside. That autumn, Yig woke up angry. First, he sent snakes to kill their dog. Then he messed with the wife's head, making her think her husband was Yig himself. She panicked and killed him with an axe, but it still wasn't over. She ended up in an asylum, where she died after giving birth to 4 snake-like creatures. According to the legends, Yig once ruled the Crimson Cavern of Yoth beneath the underground land of Kinyan, along with his mate, Quatliqua. The Serpent Men worshipped the pair, until they switched sides to follow Sethagwa, a toad-like god you'll meet in Tier 4. Yig didn't take that betrayal lightly. Instead, he got even by placing a curse on them. If you're going to double-cross a god, maybe don't pick the one that's part snake. Now that he's been betrayed by his followers, Yig has found something else to keep himself busy. Every autumn, he wakes from his slumber, goes on a feeding binge, and then personally hunts down anyone who has harmed his children. Instead of killing them, he either transforms them into serpents or sends snakes to finish them off in their sleep. Tier 3. Shoggoths. Picture this. A massive amoeba made out of black slime with eyes scattered all over its surface. That's a Shoggoth. They are jelly-like creatures with no fixed shape, but they can form limbs, organs, or anything else they need. That'd come in handy for us, but people ask for a hand and usually get a lecture instead. Shoggoths can grow up to 15 feet across, and even bigger if they stretch into a spherical form. For blobs of slime, they're surprisingly smart. They use their size and strength to solve problems like flattening giant albino penguins just by rolling over them. If you ever spot a slimy, eye-covered blob coming at you, moving aside is probably your best bet. When they're not facing off against giant penguins, Shoggoths have been known to kill by enveloping their victims and using a suction force strong enough to decapitate them. Remember how I said Shoggoths are smart? Well, they weren't meant to be. The Elder Things created them as servants for underwater construction. Their shape-shifting made them perfect for building, but they were supposed to be mindless. They could understand the Elder Things' language, and they were controlled by hypnotic commands. After countless years of servitude, the Shoggoths started changing. They slowly gained awareness and developed minds of their own. Eventually, they rebelled. The Elder Things managed to contain them for a while, but by then, they had become indispensable. The Elder Things depended on them so much that they couldn't destroy or replace them. In the end, the Shoggoths took their freedom by force. They killed the Elder Things, claimed their cities, and learned to survive on land. Cthulhu. The Cthulhu, also called the Star Spawn of Cthulhu or Shothians, are the kids of Cthulhu, and they look a lot like him, just smaller. They're octopus-shaped land dwellers, and a lot of people like to think of them as his pre-human spawn, which is a fancy way of saying they were here long before we showed up. Their bodies are made of weird matter you won't find anywhere else in the universe. They can shapeshift and pull themselves back together, which makes them tough to deal with even though they're smaller than their dad. When they're asleep, there's still a problem because they can influence dreams, drive humans insane, and generally make life uncomfortable if they feel like it. They came from the planet Shoth and eventually moved on Earth, where the Elder Things were already running the show. There was some fighting at first, but eventually both sides agreed to a truce. The Cthulhu got the land, and the Elder Things took the oceans, and everyone went back to doing their strange alien things. The Starspawn thrived and built entire cities. But then one day, it all sank into the ocean for reasons no one remembers. Most of the race either died or fell into a deep sleep along with Cthulhu, leaving the Elder Things to reclaim the Earth. All things considered, the Elder Things win this round. Cthulhu. Cthulhu is sometimes called the Kraken, or the Secret One. She's the youngest child of Cthulhu and Idya, and her main purpose is to serve as Daddy's insurance policy. If he ever dies, she's supposed to bring him back by giving birth to him again. Needless to say, great old ones do things a little differently. Physically, Cthulhu is enormous. She has a red body with black rings, 6 eyes, and small wings. Like her father, she can change her body's proportions at will, including the size of her wings. She starts with 8 arms but can grow more if she wants, sometimes up to 12, and each arm has dozens of 5-inch claws. Cthulhu originally came from the star Shoth, but now hides out on Earth in a place called Ye. Because of her very important role in the family, she's guarded day and night by Deep Ones and Yugya, Cthulhu's minions. The nickname Secret One comes from how tirelessly Cthulhu's cult works to keep every detail about her hidden. In fact, there's only a tiny record of her in Greek mythology under the name Scylla. In Lovecraft's story, 2 researchers actually managed to catch Cthulhu, thinking she was just some new octopus species. They ran experiments like they would on anything else and even tried artificial insemination, which is insane because if you're dealing with Cthulhu's daughter, the last thing you should be doing is trying to start a family. Ghatanothoa. Ghatanothoa is a great old one and the firstborn child of Cthulhu. Imagine an octopus and an elephant fused together, or a writhing tangle of organs that shift in shape whenever it feels like it. That's the closest anyone can get to picturing it. And yes, it's as horrifying as it sounds. But the real nightmare is what happens if you look at it. Anyone who sees Ghatanothoa, or even an image of it, instantly becomes a living mummy. Your skin hardens into leathery armor, but your brains and organs stay intact. So you're basically trapped in your own body. The only way out is to destroy your brain or use some serious magic. Aliens from Yugoth brought Ghatanothoa to Earth during the prehistoric era, and built a fortress over it on Mount Yadith Gol in Knaa, on the lost continent of Mu. They locked it away, but they forgot about it when they left. When humans later found it, they figured the smart move was to worship it and offer sacrifices, because if they kept it happy, maybe it wouldn't break out and turn everyone into mummies. Ghatanothoa's cult became the most respected, most feared, and most powerful on the continent of Mu before it sank into the Pacific Ocean, taking the deity and all of its followers down with it. Over the centuries, plenty of humans have tried to defeat Ghatanothoa, but it almost never goes well. One famous example is Tiog, the high priest of Shub-Niggurath, who thought he had a foolproof plan. He used a magical scroll to protect himself from being mummified when he came face to face with Gatanathoa. Unfortunately for him, Gatanathoa's priests were one step ahead. They stole the scroll and replaced it with a fake. You can guess what happens next. Byakhee. The Byakhee are an interstellar race of birds that can take you anywhere in the galaxy, assuming you can summon one and figure out how to not instantly die in space. They can survive in the vacuum of space and travel faster than light, thanks to a special organ called a hune. With it, they move at speeds around 400 times the speed of light, though their downside is their metabolism spikes, which is why they only drop down on planets when it's feeding time. If you happen to be around when that happens, congratulations, you'll end up being lunch. On Earth, Byakhee can still fly at about 70 kilometers per hour and even hover in place. Again, thanks to the hune. Some people think the hune is paramagnetic, working with the galaxy's magnetic field to propel them, which would explain why they can mess around with Earth's field to hover like it's nothing. Physically, they're hard to pin down. Lovecraft described them, but he did it mostly by saying what they weren't, which doesn't help much. What is clear is that they've got webbed feet, membranous wings, and don't resemble any bird you'd actually recognize. They're made of normal matter, so yes, weapons can hurt them, but they're also smart enough to sometimes cast spells. Most of the time, they serve Cthulhu's half-brother, Hastur the Unspeakable, and get summoned during rituals. Just in case you're getting any ideas, you should know that summoning one isn't as simple as shouting at the sky. First, you've got to down a golden drink called Space Mead and chant an incantation. If you do it right, a Byakhee hears you, no matter where it is in space, and comes flying. The mead's not just for the ritual either. It basically knocks you into a sleep-like state. So while you're riding through space on a Byakhee's back, you don't need food, water, or even air. You just kind of sleep until the trip's over. Tier 4. Migo. The Migo are an extraterrestrial race that looks like someone tried to mix fungus and crustaceans into a single organism and failed spectacularly. They are roughly 5 feet long, pink, with multiple appendages and bat-like wings that don't work well on Earth, but are perfect for flying through the ether of outer space. Their curved heads are ringed with fleshy antennae that seem to wiggle with a mind of its own. According to Lovecraft, the Migo can put themselves into suspended animation. They'll then stay frozen until sunlight or another heat source wakes them up. They communicate using the colors on their heads, though no camera has ever managed to capture them properly. For a fungus crustacean hybrid, the Migo are ridiculously resilient. Remove over half their body mass and they survive without any issues. Reduce them to just 12% of that body mass and they still live, though with limited abilities. These guys definitely give starfish a run for their money. Humans don't interest them socially, but they are scientists, and apparently we make perfect test subjects. The Migo have a device called the brain cylinder that can remove a human brain and transport it across space and time without killing it. It gets worse. Other devices can attach to the cylinder, letting the brain see, hear, and even speak while separated from its body. As horrifying as it all sounds, the Migo don't see this as cruel. They just consider it a display of their medical genius. The Migo weren't always independent. They once worshipped the Elder Gods, but a war broke out and they split. Since then, they've refused to ally with humans. Some say it's because we don't matter to their plans, which mostly involve digging up rare metals and keeping it quiet. Others think they're just too alien to bother with things like weakness or compassion. Either way, we're not getting a Christmas card. In short, the Migo are curious, cold, and efficient. They don't usually try to kill or enslave humans, but if you get in the way of their experiments, you will become part of the data. Tsathoggua. Tsathoggua, also called the Sleeper of Inkai, is one of the strangest beings in the Cthulhu mythos. While most of the old ones are powerful, mysterious, and terrifying, he's mostly lazy. He's described as a squat, pot-bellied creature with a toad-like head and short fur that makes him look part bat and part sloth. True to his look, Tsathoggua spends most of his time sleeping. He rarely leaves his chambers and doesn't like being disturbed. Anyone who wakes him up usually ends up as his next meal, unless they brought a sacrifice for him to snack on instead. Once he's done eating, he curls right back up and goes back to sleep. He's not really one for conversation or hospitality, but his worshippers still think it's worth the risk. That's because even though he's a cosmic couch potato, Tsathoggua is still dangerous. He can shapeshift into whatever form suits his environment, and he can communicate with humans, though no one knows if he speaks out loud or just projects into your head. Those who manage to serve him properly sometimes gets gifts and forbidden knowledge in return. Tsathoggua originally lived with his parents on Yugoth, before moving to Saturn and eventually traveling to Earth. He settled first in the underground realm of Inkai, and later in Mount Vormithidreth in Hyperborea. That's where the Vormis, a race of three-toed, fur-covered humanoids, first started worshipping him. They believed they were his descendants and acted as his minions. But his most famous creations weren't humanoid at all. Tsathoggua spawned the Formless Spawn, blobs of black, shapeless goo that could twist into any form. These things attacked by crushing, biting, and secreting acid strong enough to melt human flesh on contact. Their main job was guarding Tsathoggwa's temples while he snoozed, which is probably the most on-brand use of a personal army ever. As for his family ties, Tsathoggua is said to be a descendant of Azathoth, though the rest of his family tree is mostly a blur of unpronounceable names. He does have a wife, Shathak, and at least 2 children, one of whom led the Vormis. Over time, some of his descendants developed the ability to reproduce asexually, which eventually turned them into the Formless Spawn themselves. Bokrug. Bokrug, the great water lizard, is a massive semi-amphibian god who lives in a quiet lake between the cities of Ib and Sarnath in the land of Nar. He ruled over the semi-amphibian Thumha, who were citizens of Ib, and they worshipped him faithfully, until humans from Sarnath decided to invade Ib, slaughter as many Thumha as they could, and steal Bokrug's idol. That was a really bad idea. Once the idol was taken, the lake started acting weird, and anyone paying attention could see something was coming. Still, the people carried on like everything was fine. They even began celebrating the destruction of Ib every year. 1,000 years later, Sarnath had become a city of high towers, gardens, and all the signs of civilization at its peak. When the annual celebration of Ib's destruction rolled around again, Bokrug finally rose from his lake, and the city didn't stand a chance. Towers collapsed, gardens were flattened, and Sarnath was left in ruins. The takeaway here is that gods remember, and sometimes grudges can outlast empires. Other than Lovecraft, a few writers expanded on Bokrug. One even suggests it isn't just a single deity, but a whole species that came to Earth to colonize it. Their first step is sending their kids to the surface so humans can raise them. And if you're wondering who would agree to raise a Bokrug, chances are they don't realize what they've signed up for until it's way too late. Young members of the species look human at first, but eventually they mutate and get this overwhelming urge to leave the human world and swim back to their watery home. Whether it's one god or an entire species, Bokrug is terrifying, and it'll defend its worshippers, even if it takes 1,000 years to get around to it. Gloon. Gloon is a great old one, also called the Corrupter of Flesh or the Master of the Temple. In Lovecraft's short story titled The Temple, it's described as a bloated, leathery slug with skin hanging in great flaps. But appearances can be deceiving. Even though it doesn't look like much, Gloon is smart enough to disguise itself as little statues of Dionysius, the Greek god. If you touch one of its statues, you start having dreams about a ruined city under the sea. Those dreams get stuck in your head, and soon you feel like you have to find that city. This compulsion is so strong that some people don't mind drowning in the process. In one story, a World War German submarine crew found a carved ivory statue of Gloon on a dead man. One officer kept it, and then strange things started happening. The dead man swam away instead of sinking, which isn't exactly how things are meant to work. Fatigue and nightmares spread across the crew, and the sub got pulled off course by a strange current. Most of the sailors lost their minds, but Lieutenant Commander Altberg stubbornly clung to the statue. Eventually, the submarine sank, and Altberg found himself on the ocean floor, right where Gloon rules in the ruins of a sunken city. Night gaunts. Imagine wandering through a foggy alley at night with the moon barely lighting the twisted shapes of rocks around you. You hear nothing at first, and only notice the crunch of your own footsteps. Then, out of the corner of your eye, something black and sleek moves between the shadows and the air itself. Before you can react, it's gone, but you can feel it crawling over your skin without being seen. That is when you realize you're not alone. Night gaunts are a race of flying creatures who debuted in Lovecraft's novella, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. They are black, slender humanoids that have tough, leathery skin, curved horns, large bat-like wings, and a whip-like tail. The creepiest part is their face, and that's mostly because, well, they don't have one. They don't have eyes, a nose, or a mouth. It's just smooth, empty skin. Night gaunts are mostly silent and can move through different dimensions pretty easily. They slip in and out of the physical world and the dreamland so smoothly, the humans don't even notice until it's way too late. If they grab you, you end up in some unknown corner of the dreamlands, and let's just say you don't come back. In the dreamlands, night gaunts act as guardians of Mount Ngaranek, The mountain holds secret knowledge and is connected to the elder gods. Anyone who dares approach it has to deal with them, and being on their bad side is the last thing anyone wants. Even though they're not the biggest or strongest creatures in the mythos, night gaunts are perfect for creeping humans out because they're fast, silent, and completely alien. So you should probably keep your distance. Tier 5. Spider of Leng. The spiders of Leng first show up in Lovecraft's novella The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, and they're as bad as they sound. Imagine a regular spider, then blow it up to the size of a car, give it purple coloring, and top it off with a venom that can put you under for days. Most of them average around 2 to 3 meters long and weigh close to a ton. That's already enough to give anyone nightmares, but there's more. They never really stop growing. Some have been said to reach 6 meters, and the unlucky few who live long enough can stretch up to 12. Try explaining that to animal control. The bad news is, size is only part of the nightmare. These spiders are smart enough to design complex webs specifically made for trapping prey. And if the web doesn't do the trick, their venom does. A bite from one of these things doesn't kill right away. Instead, it makes the victim feel groggy. If the venom fully kicks in, you fall into a deep, unnatural sleep, where your body slows down to the bare minimum. That's when the spider drags you off and starts eating. The spiders of Leng aren't bound to one world. They're one of the few creatures in the waking world that can travel into the dreamlands while asleep. In fact, they were the first species to figure out that dreaming could sharpen intelligence, which explains why they aren't just oversized beasts. Long ago, they ruled the entire plateau of Leng until the men of Leng fought back and forced them into the southern mountains and valleys. Since then, they've survived through ambushes, venom, and endless patience. When food runs low, they don't exactly band together. A hungry spider of Leng won't hesitate to eat a smaller one, or even one of its peers if it feels bold enough. So whether in the dreamlands or the waking world, the rule is simple. Trusting a spider is always a mistake, and trusting one the size of a house is a death wish. Nofke. The Nofke are cold-loving creatures that hang out mainly in Greenland and the Antarctic Circle. They look kind of like polar bears, but with 6 legs and a single horn. They can walk on 2, 4, or all 6 legs, but they prefer all 6 when moving fast. When it comes to fighting, they stand on their hind legs and use the rest like natural weapons. Nofke have more going on than raw strength. Each one can drop temperatures and whip up a blizzard with a 20-foot radius. The blizzard grows 20 feet for every additional Nofke. So if you see more than one, you better start sprinting because a storm is coming. The blizzards last up to an hour and move so fast you can barely see in front of you. Somehow, the Nofke move through them like it's nothing, which gives them a huge advantage and makes them one of the most feared creatures in the frozen lands. Legends say the Nofke came from a lost tribe that abandoned their earthly gods to serve Ithaqua, the great windwalker. Some stories take it further, claiming they're extensions of alien powers lying in wait for anyone foolish enough to leave civilization behind. Either way, they're terrifying. Most of the time, Nofke are solitary and territorial, but occasionally they form packs. Nobody really knows why, but the leading theory is they're expecting Ithaqua to show up soon. Like many other entities, the Nofke have humans who worship them. These humans usually end up switching loyalties to Ithaqua, though whether that's out of fear or faith is anyone's guess. Ran-Tigoth. Ran-Tigoth, also called the Terror of the Hominids, is a great old one that first appeared in the short story The Horror in the Museum. It looks like a giant barrel-shaped insect with 6 limbs ending in crab-like claws. Its almost spherical head is covered in hair-like filaments, a proboscis, and 3 small eyes, which somehow manage to look terrifyingly intelligent. Feeding for Ran-Tigoth is brutal and efficient. Those hair-like feelers pierce the victim's skin, secrete digestive acids, and basically liquefy the insides. Then it slurps the goo up while leaving the rest of the body crushed and unrecognizable. You definitely don't want to have this guy over for dinner. Ran-Tigoth came to Earth from space during the Pliocene epoch, long before humans were around to mess things up. It settled in what's now Alaska, and for a while even battled Rilm Shalekorth and Afum-Za over control of the planet. And Ran-Tigoth accepted defeat, then went into a deep sleep for 3 million years, perched on its ivory throne. Yeah, that sounds perfectly reasonable. A few million years in Ran-Tigoth's nap, along came George Rogers, a man whose curiosity, or terrible decision-making, led him straight into trouble. Using instructions from the Narcotic manuscripts, he found Ran-Tigoth and decided the obvious next step was to move it into a crate and take it to his museum. Now, why does that sound familiar? Once it was in the museum, Ran-Tigoth started manipulating George from its sleep. He went mad trying to make sacrifices to it. Orabona, his manservant, protested, but George ignored him. Soon, he moved from sacrificing small islands to forcing humans to spend the night at the museum, hoping they'd become offerings. The hallucinations Rantigoth induced only made George's life more chaotic, and most of the intended victims ran away before anything could happen. Eventually, Stephen Jones, a friend of George's, began to suspect that he had lost his mind. George planned to add Jones to the sacrifice list, but Orabona intervened and became the victim instead. After that, Rantigoth went back to hiding, leaving the humans to stew in their own foolishness. Groth. Groth, also known as the Harbinger, looks like a giant rust-colored planet with one enormous red eye. That eye can close if it wants to stay hidden, which can come in handy when you're drifting through space casually, causing worlds to get destroyed. Its surface is mostly molten iron, ash, and gas, with deep cracks running across it, giving it a fractured, dangerous look. Groth drifts through the universe singing something called the music of the spheres. It's supposed to be beautiful, but it isn't always pleasant. Sometimes, when it passes through a planet, its song can stir sleeping outer gods or great old ones, and if they wake up, the planet is immediately destroyed. The moral of the story here is you should probably keep it down if your neighbors have the power to end worlds. Whenever Groth approaches a planet, everything goes wrong. Volcanoes erupt, waves crash, tides swing wildly, storms appear, and the ground shakes. It's often blamed for major mass extinctions, including the one that killed the dinosaurs. At one point, it destroyed a planet called Shigai, which was home to the Shan. Given its track record, nicknames like Nemesis and Death Star seem fair. Groth wasn't actually created by Lovecraft. Ramsey Campbell added it later in The Inhabitant of the Lake and Less Welcome Tenants. Since then, it has appeared in manga and mobile games like Tower of Saviors and World of Horror. If there's one to take away from all of this, it's that looks can be deceiving, especially in space. Because who would have thought a big floating ball that likes to sing could do so much damage? Dimensional Shambler. Dimensional Shamblers, also known as the Hunters from Beyond, aren't from here. They come from a lower dimension that's been described as a long gray plain, where the air itself rides like a nest of smoke dragons. It's not exactly vacation material. They're short, hunched creatures with leathery gray skin stretched tight over their bodies. Their faces look like something halfway between an ape and a canine, complete with yellow slit eyes and a set of crooked fangs. Their arms are so long they drag along the ground, each ending in claws sharp enough to gut a man without effort. The problem is, you don't actually see them most of the time, because of how they move between dimensions. Shamblers can't fully materialize in our world. They're there, but not really touchable. How they travel through these gaps is anyone's guess, but what's known is that killing one is close to impossible. That doesn't mean they're untouchable though. With the right ritual, you can summon one and even bind it to your will. That's when things get ugly. Once they've been assigned a target, they hunt it relentlessly, phasing in and out of space to close the distance. They look like they're trying to physically grab you, but what they really do is mess with your mind. Shamblers attack through hypnosis, and if your mental defenses aren't solid, you're done. Anyone caught gets dragged into their dimension, where other creatures are waiting. And those things don't bother chewing on flesh. They go straight for your mind and soul. That's the Lovecraftian entity iceberg. Some of these creatures have full stories behind them. Others were nothing more than a quick note in his letters. But together they built a universe that still pulls people in. Lovecraft didn't just write about monsters. He left behind a whole ecosystem of ideas that keep getting passed around and reimagined. That's all we have for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, 4 tiers, 19 cryptids. From Bigfoot, the OG forest giant, always leaving weird footprints in the woods and starring in the blurriest photos on Earth, to way down in the Congo, where people swear there's a real-life dinosaur with a long neck, massive body, and a habit of flipping boats just for fun. Let's start at the top. Tier 1, mainstream cryptid, Bigfoot, or Sasquatch. Let's kick things off with America's classic forest monster, Bigfoot. Imagine this. You're hiking through thick trees. It's damp. You smell mud. And then you get hit with this nasty, wet dog stink. Some say that's Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, hanging out nearby. He's supposed to be massive, like 6 to 10 feet tall, arms that reach past his knees, and covered in dark hair. Walks on 2 legs, leaves these giant footprints in the mud, sometimes 2 feet long. The first time you see one in the mud, you might feel a shiver. That's what makes the legend, well, legendary. But this story goes way back, even before this whole cryptozoology thing. Long ago, Native American tribes had stories about a hairy man in the woods, a wild giant who hides just out of sight. They even gave him a nickname, Sasquatch, from the Salish language in British Columbia. Now, jump to 1958, a group of workers in Bluff Creek, California, found a line of massive footprints. A local newspaper printed the story and called it Bigfoot. This became the famous name we know today. Pretty soon, everyone was talking about this mystery creature. It became such a big deal that people didn't care when, years later, the family of one of the workers admitted the tracks were fake. It was just a big wooden foot. By then, Bigfoot was already a star. Even so, people kept seeing strange things. Back in 1924, some miners near Mount St. Helens said giant ape men attacked their cabin at night by throwing rocks. Forest rangers checked it out but didn't find anything. The story just got bigger anyway. Then, in 1967, two guys named Patterson and Gimlin filmed something hairy and big walking along a creek. The video is still famous, even though many experts say it was probably a man in a suit. Over the last 50 years, there have been thousands of Bigfoot sightings. Campers, hunters, even police officers have all said they saw a huge, shaggy creature hiding in the trees. Some people say they've heard weird howling or knocking sounds in the woods. But let's be real. When you're scared, your mind can play tricks. A bear standing up, a fallen log, or even another hiker can look pretty creepy in the dark. When it comes to hard proof, it never becomes clear. People have taken pictures, made plaster casts of big footprints, and even set in hair samples. But every time scientists look closer, the proof falls apart. The hairs turn out to be from deer or people. Even the FBI tested some Bigfoot hair ones, and it was just from a deer. And with everyone carrying cameras these days, it's weird that every Bigfoot photo is still blurry. So, what's really going on? A lot of hoaxes, some mistaken animal sightings, and a whole lot of wishful thinking. But the effect is undeniable. Every year, new people head out with flashlights and snacks, hoping to find Bigfoot. For a lot of fans, the real fun isn't finding the monster, but chasing the mystery. Bigfoot might just be a story, but it's a story that keeps people exploring the unknown. And honestly, that's what makes it special. But Bigfoot isn't the only one of his kind. Turns out he has relatives, other big monkey creatures living in far-off, very different places, and actually has a power upgrade. And their names are Yeti, Abominable Snowman. Imagine yourself high in the Himalayas. The wind is cold enough to burn your face. Snow crunches under your boots, and the world is so quiet you can hear your own breath. In this icy place, people say a giant, hairy creature, part man, part beast, lives in the ridges and deep valleys. Locals call it the Yeti. Westerners sometimes call it the Abominable Snowman. Here's how the legend usually goes. The Yeti is big, standing 6 to 8 feet tall, covered in dark brown or reddish fur. Not the white fur you see in cartoons. It's supposed to walk upright, leaving behind huge, broad footprints in the snow. Some stories say it's just a big animal. Others say it has supernatural powers and can freeze you with a stare. Either way, nobody wants to meet it alone. The Yeti legend is way older than the word abominable snowman. In Tibet, the word Yeti comes from rock bear or man bear. And in Sherpa stories, the creature is sometimes more spirit than animal, kind of like a mountain guardian or a monster that haunts travelers who get too close to the edge. Outsiders just bundled all these stories together and called it a Yeti. The world first heard about the Yeti in the 1800s, when explorers and mountaineers started seeing weird footprints way up on the ice. In 1921, a British Everest team found a trail of big prints at 21,000 feet. Their Sherpa guides said it was the man-bear snowman, but when a reporter back in India wrote about it, he called it abominable snowman. That new name just stuck to their heads, and suddenly people everywhere wanted to know what was hiding in the mountains. But what about the evidence? In 1951, a famous explorer named Eric Shipton took photos of huge, strange footprints in the snow at high altitude. The prints looked almost human, but wider, and some even had what looked like claws. These pictures spread so fast, people everywhere started thinking maybe the Yeti was real. Then came the monster hunters, like sponsored expeditions, big money searches, and even museum relics. One team brought back a Yeti scalp from a monastery. Scientists tested it and said it was really goatskin, not a monster. Even weirder, another team smuggled a so-called Yeti finger out of Nepal in a woman's bra case. Later, DNA testing showed it was actually human, probably from a monk. For a while, governments got in on the craze. Nepal made it illegal to kill a Yeti unless it was self-defense, and started charging high fees for Yeti hunters. Even famous explorer Edmund Hillary tried his luck searching for evidence. He didn't find any Yetis, but he found a lot of stories, and even more whiskey. Later experts realized melting snow and rocks can make animal tracks look huge and creepy. Bears walking in their own tracks leave marks that seem almost human. Sometimes local people with wide barefoot feet made the prints. Every time scientists tested Yeti hair, bones, or poop, it turned out to be from a bear, a dog, or even a goat. There were hoaxes too. In 2011, a group in Russia claimed they found a Yeti nest with twisted tree branches and all. It was later revealed to be fake to boost tourism. Old monasteries sometimes showed off fake relics just to get attention, and some explorers just like telling tall tales. Today, most experts agree the Yeti legend probably grew out of bear sightings, wild stories, and the human urge to believe there's something mysterious in the mountains. Loch Ness Monster. Nessie. The Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie if you want to sound friendly, is the superstar of modern dinosaurs. She's supposed to be a massive long-necked creature, dark and bulky, with humps that slide across the water like a living roller coaster. If you visit Loch Ness and catch a glimpse of something moving in those deep, murky waves, good luck. Your photo might end up on the news. But the story isn't new. It goes back over 1,500 years. There are ancient stone carvings that show strange animals with flippers, sometimes called Pictish beasts, but their link to Nessie is speculative and not directly tied to Loch Ness. Now, here's where things get interesting. In 1933, a new road opened up along Loch Ness, making it way easier for people to spot anything odd on the water. Not long after, a couple saw what they called an enormous animal splashing around. The newspapers went wild, and soon, reporters and even a circus arrived, hoping to cash in these sightings. The circus offered a reward for anyone who would catch Nessie. The Daily Mail even sent a famous hunter to track her down. Instead, he found huge footprints on the shore. Except, when experts checked, they were made with a hippopotamus foot, probably taken from an umbrella stand. Seriously, even so, the legend kept growing. The real explosion happened in 1934 with the surgeon's photograph. It's that grainy black and white photo of a long neck poking out of the water. For years, people thought this was real proof of a dinosaur living in Scotland, even though, actually, plesiosaurs were not dinosaurs, but aquatic reptiles. But scientists noticed some big problems. Loch Ness was a solid block of ice just 10,000 years ago, so any giant reptile would have been frozen out. Plus, cold-blooded creatures can't survive in freezing water. In the end, the famous photo turned out to be a hoax, made with a toy submarine and a fake head. The guy who faked the footprints was part of this one too. But by that point, nobody really cared. Nessie fever was everywhere. People didn't give up. In the 1960s and 70s, teams of volunteers camped out with binoculars and cameras, scanning the loch day and night. Scientists used sonar, hoping to find something big swimming in the deep. Sometimes the sonar picked up large moving shapes. One group even snapped a blurry underwater photo that looked a bit like a flipper. For believers, that was enough. Even the name Nessateris rhomboteryx got a spot in a science journal, until someone noticed it was an anagram for Monster Hoax by Sir Peter S. Nice touch. As time went on, the evidence never really got better. Photos and videos showed humps on the water, but most turned out to be boats, deer, logs, or just waves. Huge efforts like Operation Deep Scan in 1987 filled the loch with sonar boats, and found some weird readings, but nothing that could be confirmed as a monster. In 2003, the BBC swept the whole lake with 600 sonar beams and found nothing. So what is Nessie? Some say it's all mistakes, like logs, otters, swimming deer, big fish, even weird wave patterns called seiches that can look like humps. Sometimes seals swim in from the sea. Hoaxers have built models and fake photos. The wildest theory, that Nessie is a living dinosaur, again, aquatic reptile, is pretty much ruled out by science. But there's one new twist. In 2019, scientists checked Loch Ness for environmental DNA. No dinosaur or monster DNA, but tons of eel DNA. Maybe, just maybe, some people saw giant eels. It's not as exciting, but it fits the facts. Even without real proof, Nessie keeps the crowds coming. Tourists always come back to the loch. Monster museums fight for visitors, and die-hard researchers still hope for a miracle. Just last year, hundreds of people joined the biggest search in 50 years. They used drones, sonar, and even underwater microphones. Nessie is a legend, not a proven animal, but she's alive in Scotland's stories. And as long as there's fog on the water, someone will swear they saw something move. And honestly, who can blame him? Speaking of modern dinosaurs, we actually have one more modern dinosaur out there. Not in a lake, but in a deep African swamp, with a long neck and stories of smashing canoes. We will talk more about them in Tier 2. Mothman. It's late at night on a country road in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. You're driving with friends. The air smells damp. The only light comes from your headlights. And then you see it. People described Mothman as part man or part bird. Most agreed it had leathery, bat-like wings, a bulky body, and legs like a giant crane. Some even thought it had white or gray feathers. Others said it was covered in dark, shiny skin. When you speed up, it lifts off the ground and glides over your car, silent and fast, keeping pace no matter how hard you push the pedal. This was the scene in November 1966, when two young couples, the Scarberrys and the Millettes, rushed to the police, pale and shaking, talking about a monster with long wings and big red eyes. Of course, as usual, the newspapers ran wild with it. Man-sized bird, creature, something. And just like that, the legend of Mothman was born. But Mothman wasn't finished with Point Pleasant, not by a long shot. Over the next month, the sightings multiplied. Dozens of people around the Ohio River Valley started calling in, swearing they'd seen the same thing. A huge winged humanoid with fiery red eyes, either perched on a rooftop, chasing cars, or just standing by the roadside in the mist. Some said it looked like a man with wings. Others called it a giant bird. One farmer said his dog vanished after he shone a flashlight at two glowing red orbs outside his house. Nobody could agree on every detail, except for one thing: the eyes. Everybody remembered the eyes. But things got much darker in December 1967. At rush hour, the Silver Bridge, Point Pleasant's main link across the river, suddenly collapsed and dropped dozens of cars into the icy water below. 46 people died. And just like that, Mothman sightings stopped. Locals whispered that the creature had been a warning, a sign that tragedy was coming. Some said it was a supernatural omen, their own banshee. Others just called it a tragic coincidence. Years passed, but the legend never faded. Journalist John Keel wrote a book about the sightings and tied them to UFOs, haunted phone calls, and other weird happenings. Hollywood turned the story into a movie in 2002. Point Pleasant went all in and built a 12-foot tall Mothman statue, launching an annual festival that draws thousands, and opening a Mothman museum packed with old newspapers, sketches, and interviews. But what was it really? Scientists and wildlife experts have a simple answer: misidentified animals. West Virginia University's biologists suggested that the monster could have been a sandhill crane, a really big bird with a red patch around its eyes and a wingspan wider than most cars. Others say it could have been a huge owl, since their eyes can reflect red in headlights. When people expect to see something strange, every shadow becomes a monster. And as for the bridge collapse, it turns out was due to a broken piece of metal, not a curse or omen. There are no photos, no bones, not even a feather. The only real evidence is in the stories, the newspaper clippings, and the memories of those who say they saw something impossible on a dark night. Even now, new Mothman sightings pop up in other states, but experts chalk them up to birds, big imaginations, and the power of suggestion. Maybe there's nothing in the sky at all, or maybe you just missed it. But if you really want to stare at the sky to look for cryptids, there's another winged legend that is supposedly easier to spot than Mothman, yet harder to see. This creature is so huge, its wings block the sun. We will talk about that in Tier 3. Wendigo. The Wendigo is a classic American horror legend. Super skinny, like skin stretched over bone skinny, with pale gray skin and glowing eyes buried deep in its skull. People say it's at least 7 feet tall, maybe taller, and its hands are basically cracked yellow claws. Its mouth is half gone, lips chewed off, just showing nasty, bloody fangs. Some versions give it fur. Others slap on deer antlers, but one thing never changes. It always reeks like death. But here's the real question. How did this creepy thing end up in so many campfire stories? The Wendigo legend comes from the Algonquian-speaking tribes, like the Cree and Ojibwe. These were people who actually knew what it was like to starve during brutal winters. For them, the Wendigo wasn't just a monster. It was a warning. It was a spirit of hunger and greed that hunted the selfish. If someone ever resorted to cannibalism, the legend says they could turn into a Wendigo and be cursed to wander the woods forever, never full, always starving, always hunting. The first written stories go back almost 400 years. Jesuit missionaries heard the locals talk about something called the Atshen, or Wendigo, which basically meant evil spirit or cannibal thing in the woods. It preyed on people who wandered off alone there. And over time, the story evolved and started blending with real-life horror. Like in 1879, there was this Cree trapper named Swift Runner. He killed and ate his whole family and said the Wendigo made him do it. Or in 1907, when two Ojibwe brothers murdered a woman because they thought she was turning into one. These cases freaked people out so much that the Wendigo legend started to feel way more real. Some doctors even tried to explain it. They called it Wendigo psychosis, a legit mental illness where people believed they were turning into the creature, or obsessed over eating human flesh. These episodes usually happen during times of famine or extreme isolation. Basically, the cold and hunger started messing with their heads. So, is there any actual proof the Wendigo exists? Short answer, nope. No bones, no bodies, no photos. Just urban legends. When someone sees a Wendigo, it's always secondhand, like scratches in the snow or something moving between the trees. People even swear they've seen old black and white photos of it nailed to barn walls, but those pictures don't exist. It's all memory glitches and folklore doing their thing. The only real evidence was court records and newspaper clippings about people who believed in the Wendigo, or used it as a scapegoat when things got dark. So yeah, the myth is definitely real, but the monster, not so much. But there's another tale in New Jersey. A monster with bat wings and a horse head, born from a curse, freaking out whole towns. Turns out Wendigo has a wild cousin. Let's check it out. Tier 2. Regional legends and semi-obscure cryptids. Jersey Devil. Imagine you're walking through the thick woods of South Jersey at night. The trees are tight and it's super silent. You can only hear your own footsteps crunching leaves. Then, out of nowhere, there's a high-pitched scream from the darkness ahead of you, and something just launches out to you. It's got a horse's head, goat horns, bat wings, a snout, a long tail whipping side to side, and it's bouncing around on two scrawny legs. Oh, and hooves instead of feet. Yep, that's the Jersey Devil, New Jersey's most famous monster. People have been telling stories about it for over 2 centuries. Most say it's somewhere between 3 and 6 feet tall. But no matter the version, it's definitely not anything from the zoo. So where did this thing come from? The most famous story starts back in the 1700s. A woman named Mother Leeds was having her 13th kid during a storm, and she'd had enough. So she yelled, "Let this one be the devil." Well, it worked. The baby popped out, morphed into a monster on the spot, grew horns and wings, and shot straight up the chimney into the Pine Barrens. After that, every weird noise or dead chicken in that area was blamed on the devil. But there's no record of any of that. No newspapers, no diaries, nothing contemporary. Historians think the story probably started as gossip tied to the real Leeds family, who were unpopular for religious or political reasons. Over time, Leeds Devil turned into the one and only Jersey Devil. Then came 1909, and things got wild. For one full week in January, people across South Jersey and Philly reported seeing the devil. It flew over rooftops, screamed from the woods, and even attacked a trolley car. It escalated to a full chaos. Schools shut down. Hunting parties went out with shotguns and torches. The Philadelphia Zoo even offered a cash reward if anyone could catch it. Some prankster literally glued wings and horns onto a kangaroo and tried to turn it in. Yeah, seriously. Of course it was fake, but by then the legend was unstoppable. Sightings slowed down after that, but they never stopped. Taxi drivers, hunters, farmers, even some famous people swore they saw something jumping across roads or flying between trees. But no photos, no captures, no evidence. Every weird footprint turned out to be a dog, or a horse, or just a bored teen playing a prank. So what is the Jersey Devil? Scientists say it's just a legend. Probably people mistaking cranes, owls, or deer in the dark, or straight up making stuff up for attention, or to scare their little cousins at camp. No bones, no photos, no proof. New Jersey's all in on this thing. There's a Jersey Devil festival, a museum, even a pro hockey team named after it. People sell t-shirts, carve pumpkins, and retell the story every Halloween like it's gospel. Just a story that refuses to die. That's the real power of the Jersey Devil. Beast of Bray Road, Wisconsin's werewolf. Just like Jersey Devil, this one starts with you driving at night. But this time, your headlights catch a literal werewolf, standing by the ditch. 7 feet tall, covered in thick gray-brown fur. It has a wolf's snout, pointed ears, and glowing eyes that flash red, orange, or bright yellow in the dark. That's the Beast of Bray Road, Wisconsin's most famous cryptid. Most people call it a werewolf, or dogman. They say it walks on 2 legs, but sometimes the beast drops to all 4s and runs like a giant wolf. But where did this wolfman come from? And why do so many people swear they saw it? The first story goes back to 1936, when a night watchman saw a huge wolf-like creature digging on a burial mound. It stood up, locked eyes with him, and then chased him through the field. That story stuck around, but the legend really took off in the late 1980s and early 90s. People started calling in sightings. Livestock showed up dead, organs missing. Drivers said their cars had claw marks, and a few claimed something jumped onto the hood or roof. A local reporter, Linda Godfrey, started collecting the stories for the newspaper. She was skeptical at first, but after hearing from dozens of people who seemed genuinely scared, she wondered if something was out there. The beast blew up into a local legend. Books, documentaries, even a cheesy horror movie came out. People called it Man-Wolf, Dogman, or just the Beast. It became the star of Hollywood haunted hayrides and scary campfire stories. So what's the truth behind the beast? Most scientists and wildlife experts aren't convinced. Wisconsin has real wolves, and it's full of big dogs, coyotes, and even the occasional bear. Some think the beast is just a big animal seen at night, or maybe even an escaped exotic pet. A few sightings might be outright hoaxes or the work of pranksters, because someone once scared teens in a wolf mask for laughs. Every time someone finds a weird footprint or hears a growl, the legend grows. There are some pretty wild stories out there, though. One woman in the 80s said she hit something with her car, then looked back to see a wolfman clinging to the trunk, scratching deep grooves in the metal. Another said the creature leapt on her hood and stared at her with glowing eyes. People talk about finding 12-inch long footprints and catching whiffs of a rotten meat smell hanging in the air. But even after all the stories, no clear photos, no bodies, no fur, no DNA. Just a lot of spook locals and late-night horror story time. So why do so many people keep seeing the Beast of Bray Road? Maybe it's the dark roads, the thick woods, and the way fear can turn a glimpse of fur or a weird shadow into a monster. Maybe it's just a good story, one that makes you roll up your windows and lock your doors when you drive through Elkhorn at night. For now, the Beast of Bray Road is a local legend, part of Wisconsin's weird history. If you ever drive down that stretch after midnight, keep your eyes peeled. You might see a flash of fur in the headlights, or maybe, if you're lucky or unlucky, you'll spot those glowing eyes staring right back at you. And if chasing down blurry cryptids at 3 a.m. sounds like your idea of fun, maybe it's time to give your brain something a little more concrete to solve. That's where Brilliant comes in. Today's sponsor. Brilliant is a learning platform that actually levels up how you think, with thousands of interactive lessons in science, math, data, programming, and logic. Instead of passively watching lectures and hoping it sticks, Brilliant lets you learn by doing. Each lesson is packed with hands-on problem solving that builds understanding from the ground up, which studies show is up to 6 times more effective than just watching videos. I've been using it between script edits and cryptid rabbit holes, and recently I've been hooked on their scientific thinking course. It teaches you how to break big, messy questions into smaller, testable parts, which, yeah, kind of helps when the internet's arguing whether nightcrawlers are aliens, ghosts, or just a pair of sentient pants. Lessons are bite-sized, visual, and surprisingly satisfying. No jargon walls either, no filler, just real thinking practice that sticks with you. You can try Brilliant for free at brilliant.org/quackdoc, and if you like it, you'll get 20% off an annual premium membership for unlimited access. That's brilliant.org/quackdoc, or scan the code on screen. Links in the description too, because cryptids might not be real, but thinking better definitely is. Bunyip. What would you do if you saw huge bubbles rising in a dark swamp, then heard a roar that sounded too deep for any animal, and then a creature that's slippery, hairy, loud, and just mysterious enough to keep you awake at night just stares at you from the swamp? That's the bunyip, a creature feared in Australia for generations. But here's the thing, nobody agrees on what the bunyip actually looks like. Some stories, especially from Aboriginal people, make it sound otherworldly. One old tale describes the bunyip as an enormous starfish with arms reaching out from the mud. But in most stories, it's more like a seal mixed with a dog, about as long as a grown man, with dark fur, big eyes, and a roar that shakes the whole swamp. Other times, the bunyip turns into something even weirder. A giant animal with a tiny horse head, a super long neck, and folds of loose, leathery skin. A few versions say it has a dog's face and a tail like a horse, and it can walk on land or swim underwater. But the one thing everyone agrees on is that the bunyip lives in deep, muddy water, like swamps, rivers, and billabongs where you can't see what's beneath the surface. It's supposed to come out at night and hunt for crayfish. sometimes, if you believe the scarier stories, for anyone who gets too close to the edge. Aboriginal stories often use the bunyip as a warning. Don't go near the water alone, or the bunyip will get you. In some Dreamtime stories, the bunyip punishes people who break natural laws like catching too many fish, disturbing sacred places, or wandering where they shouldn't. So where did the legend start? It's ancient. The word bunyip comes from languages in southeastern Australia, but every region had its own name for swamp spirits. When Europeans arrived in the 1800s, they started hearing bunyip stories from local guides. At first, settlers brushed it off as superstition, but that all changed in 1845, when a strange set of giant bones was found near a river in Victoria. Aboriginal witnesses told the newspapers these belonged to a bunyip. Within a year, a bunyip skull turned up on the banks of the Murrumbidgee River. It was put on display in Sydney, and crowds lined up to see the monster's head. For weeks, the city buzzed with bunyip mania. Newspaper headlines, sketches of the beast, and wild stories about monster attacks. Of course, scientists quickly pointed out that the skull was just from a young cow. But that didn't matter. The bunyip was officially a celebrity. People started seeing it everywhere, in creeks, marshes, and muddy lakes. William Buckley, an escaped convict who lived with Aboriginal people for decades, swore he saw a bunyip with a feathered back in the marshes, and that the locals believed it had magic powers. As for what the bunyip really was, people have guessed everything, from seals that swam upriver to giant extinct animals, like the Diprotodon, basically a rhino-sized wombat, to the weird calls of marsh birds echoing over the water at night. Some researchers even think that the bunyip was just a way to keep kids from wandering too close to the water. But like every cryptid ever, nobody ever caught one. Every supposed bunyip track belonged to a normal animal. The only real evidence is fear and a lot of campfire stories. Chupacabra, the goat sucker. Imagine stepping outside on a humid night and finding your goats, chickens, or rabbits dead in the dirt, with twin puncture marks on their necks, and not a drop of blood left in their bodies. That's when you start to hear the word chupacabra, or the goat sucker. But what does a chupacabra even look like? That depends on who you ask. The original stories from 1995 in Puerto Rico described it as a creature standing as tall as a teenager, walking on two legs, with gray or greenish skin, red glowing eyes, and a row of spines down its back. It was said to hop like a kangaroo and smell really bad, kind of like rotten eggs and wet dog mixed together. After the Puerto Rico panic, the story spread everywhere. News reports, radio hosts, and local legends all picked up the name. The creature started popping up across Latin America and even in the southern United States. But this isn't the only version people have seen. People in Texas, for example, saw four-legged animals, like skinny, hairless dogs or coyotes. These chupacabras were usually small, with patchy skin, sharp teeth, and big ears. They limped around on all fours and looked sick and hungry. Not like the monster from the old drawings. So why did the story change? Here's where scientists stepped in. Experts studied the bodies of these so-called chupacabras and found something simple. They were just regular dogs or coyotes with a skin disease called mange. Mange makes animals lose their fur and look bony, with tough, crusty skin. When you see one at night, it's easy to let your mind turn it into a monster. And then there's the media. News channels, cartoons, t-shirts, even sandwiches all started using the chupacabra name. Every time a rancher found dead animals, the legend grew. One time, a radio station even sent a guy into the woods wearing a goat costume, just to see what would happen. But even with all this hype, nobody has found real proof. No bones, no bodies, no clear photos. Even the so-called bloodless kills turned out to be typical predator attacks. Coyotes often go for the neck, and post-mortem blood settling can make animals look drained. But autopsies don't support any actual blood sucking. There have been a few hoaxes too. People have faked tracks, doctored photos, and made up wild stories just for attention. Even viral videos in recent years, like the blurry footage from Texas or South America, always end up being sick dogs, coyotes, or sometimes raccoons. In the end, the chupacabra is a modern myth. It's an answer people turn to when something strange happens on the farm, or when they want to share a scary story. There's no real monster behind it, just fear, imagination, and maybe a sick coyote on a dark road. But hey, sometimes the story is the best part. And if you think this goat sucker's mutant dogs are scary, wait till you hear about the ones in Ireland. They're in the water, and if you piss them off, they'll chase you all the way to the edge of the earth. Darhu, Ireland. The name comes from Irish Gaelic. Dar meaning water, and hu means dog. So it literally means water dog. but what people described was much more frightening than a soggy retriever. According to most accounts, the Dorhu looked like a giant otter crossed with a dog. It was usually said to be 6 or 7 feet long, about as big as a grown crocodile. Some people described it as having slick dark fur that was almost black, while others said it was white with patches or stripes. Its body was muscular and built low to the ground, with a long tail and webbed paws, perfect for swimming. The head was sometimes described as more dog-like than otter, with a strong jaw and big teeth. In some old stories, its skin was slimy or smooth, and its eyes were dark and glaring. But the Dorhu was more than just scary looking. In Irish folklore, it was a killer. The monster supposedly lived in remote lakes and rivers, lurking near the water's edge. It would attack people who got too close, sometimes dragging them under or leaping from the water to kill them on the shore. A common warning in old stories was that the Dorhu hunted in pairs. If you killed one, its mate would appear and hunt you down. There are stories of farmers, fishermen, and even children being snatched or found dead after swimming or playing near lonely lows. The most famous Dorhu story comes from County Leitrim, at Glenad Lough, in the early 1700s. The legend says that a woman named Grace McLaughlin, sometimes called Grace Connolly, which I don't know which is true, was washing clothes by the lake when a Dorhu killed her. Her husband Terence tracked it down and killed it with a spear. According to some versions, the monster's mate then chased Terence for miles until he killed that one too. The story became so well known locally that when Grace was buried, her gravestone showed a carving of a dog otter with a spear in its neck, and it became a unique bit of cryptid evidence that still stands in the graveyard today. The gravestone shows a large creature, sprawled on its back, with big paws and a hound-like head, just as the stories describe. Written records of the Dorhu go back even further. In the late 1600s, the historian Roderick O'Flaherty wrote about a beast at Lough Mask, calling it an Irish crocodile that looked like a slimy greyhound. He described it as having fish-like skin and no noticeable hair. In later years, the Dorhu legend spread throughout Western Ireland. Some people claimed to see enormous otters in lakes or rivers. A few even described fights with the monster. Newspapers and amateur cryptozoologists in the 1800s and 1900s published stories about giant otters seen in Mayo, Galway, and Donegal, but none were ever caught or proven real. Modern scientists don't believe the Dorhu is a real animal. There are several reasons for this. First, Ireland does have otters, but they're small and not dangerous to humans. No large otter, wolf otter, or mysterious aquatic dog has ever been captured, killed, or even photographed in Ireland. The supposed evidence, like Grace's gravestone, proves only that people believed the legend, not that the animal existed. Some researchers think that the Dorhu was a way for people to explain drownings or mysterious deaths in wild places. Others say that a rare aggressive otter or even a misidentified seal could have started the stories. Another idea is that the Dorhu legend is part of a bigger group of water monster tales found in Ireland and Scotland. For example, the Scottish Kelpie or Iach Ushka is also a water beast that drags people to their doom. In Ireland, the Dorhu fits the bill. It's an animal you already know, a dog or otter, but bigger, meaner, and magical. There have been a few supposed sightings in modern times, but none have ever been proven. One artist in 2003 claimed to see a black otter-like creature with orange flippers off the coast of Omi Island. Another report in 2023 claimed video evidence of a large otter-shaped animal in Connemara, but the footage was too blurry to confirm anything. Most recent evidence is just stories passed along on the internet, retold in books about Irish monsters. Today, the Dorhu lives on in local legend, tourism, and Irish pop culture. You can visit the Glenade Grave, read about the story on travel blogs, or watch short documentaries about the Irish waterhound. Local museums, history tours, and even a few pubs have embraced the story as part of their heritage. But there's no ongoing search for the creature, and wildlife experts say that if a giant otter ever did live in Ireland, it's been extinct for thousands of years. Mongolian deathworm. If you love Dune, this is for you. Mongolia basically has their own Arrakis and its own Shai Hulud, but in the real world, it's called the Mongolian deathworm, or Olgoi Korkoi. First, the visuals. Locals say the worm is about the length of your arm, sometimes even longer, thick as a soda can, and colored an intense bloody red. I know, it's not as big as you expect. Its skin is sometimes leathery, sometimes slick, and the whole thing moves by wriggling or sliding just under the surface, like a living intestine. Some reports describe a pair of spikes or horns on either end, and a mouth full of tiny, sharp teeth. When threatened, this thing is supposed to spit acid that melts flesh, or even zap you with an electric shock. The deadliest part? According to legend, you don't even have to touch it. Get too close and it can kill you with just a look. Even though I'm not sure where worm eyes are placed. But is there really something lurking beneath the dunes? No pun intended. Or is the death worm just another story that grew legs and fangs in the telling? The legend goes way back, passed down by Mongolian nomads as a warning about wandering the dunes alone. Before the 20th century, hardly anyone outside Mongolia had heard of the death worm. That changed in the 1920s, when American explorer Roy Chapman Andrews went looking for dinosaur fossils, and heard local tales about a bright red worm, thick as a man's arm and deadly at a touch. Mongolians warned him that even talking about the Olgoi Korkoi was dangerous. Andrews never saw the creature himself, but his book helped launch the death worm's international reputation as the Gobi's most infamous monster. As the story spread, the death worm got new details. Some said it could kill camels just by spitting at them, or that its body would change color when it was angry. In the 1990s, cryptozoologists and thrill seekers trekked through the desert, armed with cameras and homemade traps. A few even tried setting off vibrations or explosions to lure it out of the sand, but every search ended the same way. No worm, no tracks, no acid pools, just miles of empty sand and some great stories to bring home. So what's behind the legend? Scientists are blunt. There's no known animal like this in the Gobi Desert, and no body has ever turned up. Some herpetologists think people are seeing regular sand boas, harmless brownish snakes that burrow and only show up after it rains. When one was shown to local herders, many agreed it looked just like the death worm they'd heard about. Others guess it might be a legless lizard, or that stories of deadly snake bites or sand accidents mutated over time into something much scarier. A few diehards float theories about surviving prehistoric monsters or even alien creatures, but with zero proof to back them up. Every expedition, documentary, and scientific search has come back with nothing. Not a single worm body, not a reliable photograph, just word of mouth and legends shared around campfires. Most local Mongolians treat the death worm the same way Westerners treat dragons or Bigfoot. It's fun to talk about, but nobody really expects to see one. In fact, even the classic death worm photos you see online are always fakes. Sticks, hoses, clever Photoshop jobs, or sometimes just ropes tossed in the sand for a prank. Still, the legend keeps growing. It's a staple of cryptid lists, and every year, a few new sightings pop up, though never with any real evidence. Even tourists can buy death worm souvenirs in Gobi getaway towns. Alright, enough for killer cryptids for now. Our next entry is actually kinda cute, at least from what I think. It doesn't kill, doesn't harass anyone, just chillin'. It's the Fresno Nightcrawler. If you want to see the weirdest creature ever caught on a home security camera, meet the Fresno Nightcrawler. People call it the walking pants monster. That sounds like a joke, but the first time anyone saw it, nobody was laughing. It all happened late at night in Fresno, California, back in 2007. Jose, a local man, was worried about people sneaking into his yard, so he set up an old security camera. One night, his dog started barking like crazy. Jose got out of bed, probably annoyed, and checked his TV monitor, expecting to see a raccoon or maybe a teenager cutting across the lawn. What he saw instead looked like something from another planet. On the black and white camera, two shapes walked slowly across the grass. It had two very long, thin legs that seemed to glide across the lawn. There was a small bump on top, maybe a head, maybe just part of the legs, but no arms, no body, no face. Nothing you'd expect to see on a living thing. The legs were pale white and seemed to move without bending much, almost like stilts in a puppet show. The second Nightcrawler was even smaller, following the first like a shadow. Neither creature made a sound. They just walked straight through the yard, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Jose couldn't believe what he was seeing. He played the tape again and again. He even brought in a Spanish TV station, hoping someone could explain it. The TV host, Victor Camacho, brought cameras and experts, but nobody could say for sure what those things were. When the footage went on the news, people all over Fresno started talking. Some thought it was a hoax. Others wondered if it was an alien. But the video didn't show wires, costumes, or any obvious tricks. You could feel the tension in the city. People were curious, but also a little scared, because nobody knew what those things really were. A few years later, another strange video popped up. This time from Yosemite National Park. A security camera there showed two tall, skinny white figures, just like the first one, gliding through the trees at night. Their legs moved in the same smooth way, almost floating across the ground. Again, there were no arms, no faces, just those odd white legs moving quietly through the dark. Some people thought these new night crawlers looked even more unreal than the ones in Fresno. Ever since that, more and more stories have popped up online. One person in Ohio said they saw a very tall, gray, armless creature cross the road late at night. That one was bigger and ran much faster, but the shape was still weirdly similar. Other internet users claim to see night crawlers in faraway places, but most of those are just stories with no real proof. So what are these things? Some say the nightcrawler is an alien, sent to Earth to watch us or collect samples. Others think it's a ghost or a creature from another world that can appear and disappear when it wants. Skeptics believe it's a prank, a puppet, a kid in pants, or a computer trick. TV investigators tried to recreate the video using puppets and special effects, but they couldn't get it to look exactly right. The way the nightcrawler glides is just too smooth and creepy. What's weird is that the nightcrawler doesn't do anything scary. It doesn't chase people, make noise, or hurt animals. It just walks by, minding its own business, and then vanishes. There are no footprints left behind, no fur, no broken branches. Still, the Fresno nightcrawler has become famous all over the world. People make drawings, cartoons, and even plush dolls of the creature. There's a statue of it at a local Fresno art trail. Every Halloween, someone dresses up as the nightcrawler, shuffling down the street with long white pants and a hoodie. It's become a kind of mascot for Fresno. Even now, nobody has proved what the nightcrawler is. The original witness, Jose, never said he faked it, and nobody else has come forward to confess. The videos keep popping up on TV shows and websites, and people still argue about whether it's real or just a really good trick. Mokele Bembe, Congo River Basin, Africa. The Mokele Bembe is Africa's most famous living dinosaur. But the truth behind this legend is a lot muddier than the swamps it's supposed to live in. Let's start with what people say they've seen. According to locals along the Congo River Basin, the Mokele Bembe is as big as an elephant or a hippo. People say it has a long, flexible neck, kind of like a brachiosaurus, smooth, gray or reddish skin, and sometimes a single horn or tooth sticking out from its snout. Most say it walks on 4 legs, and its tail is either thick like an alligator or not mentioned at all, depending on who you ask. No one ever reports fur. The creature is usually described as shy but powerful. It supposedly eats only plants and spends its days lurking in rivers, occasionally tipping over boats and scaring off anyone who gets too close. Some villagers claim it kills people who bother it, but it doesn't eat them. It just disappears back under the water, leaving broken canoes and terrified fishermen behind. There are lots of small differences in the details, but all the stories agree on one thing. The Mokele Bembe is huge, weird looking, and doesn't belong with the rest of Africa's wildlife. For a lot of people, it sounds exactly like a dinosaur that somehow survived to modern times. The outside world didn't hear about the Mokele Bembe until 1913, when a German explorer named Ludwig von Stein traveled through what's now the Republic of Congo. He wrote that locals described a monster with a long neck, huge body, and a single horn that was big enough to flip over a boat. His story got picked up in Europe, and by the 1930s, cryptozoology books were treating Mokele Bembe like proof that dinosaurs could still be out there. But this creature really went viral in the 1980s. Roy McCall, a biologist from the University of Chicago, led a couple of famous expeditions to Lake Tele and the Likoala Swamp. He interviewed dozens of villagers, collected footprints, and listened to story after story about the giant river beast. McCall and his team even thought they saw something moving in the water a few times, but every photo and footprint they found turned out to be inconclusive or belonged to something already known, like a hippo or elephant. Still, McCall's book, A Living Dinosaur, turned the Mokele Bembe into a global cryptid superstar. After that, the legend appeared in documentaries, magazines, and even church pamphlets, with some creationists using it as evidence against evolution. In 1983, a Congolese zoologist named Marcelin Agnagna claimed he saw the creature himself. He described a reddish head with eyes poking above the water. Japanese TV crews in 1987 filmed what looked like a neck and head moving in Lake Tele. But skeptics later said it was probably just 2 fishermen in a canoe. One, Redmond O'Hanlon, spent months in the swamps, but decided the whole thing was probably a case of mistaken identity. People were seeing elephants wading across rivers, with their trunks raised like a long neck. That would look pretty strange through the mist, especially from far away. So what could the Mokele Bembe really be? Scientists have a few ideas. The most popular one is that it's a combination of stories about known animals, hippos, elephants, and especially black rhinos. Black rhinos used to live in that part of Africa, and they're big, gray, with a single horn, and sometimes wade through rivers. A hippo's huge body and aggressive nature might have helped fuel the scarier parts of the story, like attacking boats. Some people even think giant monitor lizards or crocodiles could explain parts of the legend. But there's another layer to all this. Over time, as Western explorers and missionaries traveled deeper into Africa, they brought their own ideas about dinosaurs. Local people might have started describing the river monster as more dinosaur-like because that's what the outsiders wanted to hear. In the 20th century, explorers and creationists offered money or gifts to anyone who had a good story. Sometimes that means villagers gave answers that sounded more exciting, or drew pictures based on what they'd seen in books, not real life. A few people have tried to fake evidence too. In the 1990s, a British explorer named Rory Nugent took a fuzzy photo of something in the water that looked almost like a head and neck, but experts later said it was just a log. Other expeditions brought back casts of footprints, but scientists who studied them said they matched elephants or hippos, not dinosaurs. No expedition has ever found bones, teeth, skin, or droppings that belonged to anything unknown. Local trackers, when shown photos of hippos or rhinos, would often say, "Yes, that's the Mokele Mbembe," which shows how blurry the line is between real animals and the legend. In the end, every serious investigation by scientists, journalists, or local guides has come up empty. The Congo Basin is huge, muddy, and hard to search, but it's hard to believe a giant dinosaur could hide for so long without leaving real evidence. No bodies have washed up. No remains have ever turned up in village markets or animal traps. Even so, the Mokele Bembe refuses to die. It still pops up on TV shows and cryptid websites, and every few years there's a new rumor about a sighting. Sometimes people blame this on deforestation, more people moving through the wild areas, seeing hippos or elephants for the first time, and getting a good scare. There's something kind of magical about this legend. Whether it's a real animal or not, the story has brought together villagers, explorers, scientists, and armchair adventurers from all over the world. By the way, dinosaurs in Africa aren't just in the Congo. There's another one in Zambia. This one attacks people in the water, but the difference is it's not an aquatic dinosaur. We'll talk about that in the next tier and entry. Tier 3. Less known cryptids. Kongamato. The Kongamato isn't some blurry shape you see out of the corner of your eye. People describe it as a straight-up prehistoric animal. Imagine a massive blood-red lizard with leathery wings that can reach 7 feet. It also has a long tail and a beak packed full of needle-sharp teeth. In fact, its name literally means breaker of boats, which, pretty much sums up their legend. You cross its river, and the next thing you know, something swoops down and flips you into the water. Some say just seeing this thing is enough to get you killed. Honestly, if a blood-red pterodactyl dive-bombed on my canoe, I'd drop dead on the spot too. This isn't just one tribe's ghost story either. The legend is baked into the culture across Zambia, Angola, and the Congo, especially around the Giundu swamps. The Kaonde people didn't think the Kongomoto was a spirit or demon. To them, it was just a really terrible animal you had to look out for. Like, pack your anti-Kongomoto charm levels of caution. And this wasn't some ancient myth that faded away. Western explorers picked up the story in the 1920s. Frank Meland, one of the early outsiders to write about it, showed villagers some dinosaur pictures. They didn't care about T-Rex or Triceratops, but as soon as he flashed a drawing of a pterosaur, the reaction was instant. That's it. That's the Kongamato. In the 1940s, a colonial game warden hears from the locals, if you see the Kongamato, start writing your will. He even found weird tracks in the mud, with drag marks that didn't fit any known animal. Decades later, travelers and biologists kept running into stories and sometimes very freaked out people who claimed they saw or barely survived an encounter. But here's the thing, there's no hard evidence. There's a blurry old photograph snapped by a British reporter in the 50s. It's about as convincing as a photo of Bigfoot, if Bigfoot had wings and the camera was shaking. Scientists rolled their eyes, but that hasn't stopped people from trying to find the beast. From the 1930s up to the late 1980s, naturalists and full-blown cryptid hunters trekked through the swamps, recording witness stories and snapping pictures of anything that even looked like a flying monster. The most they got was a handful of wild tales and maybe a scratch or two. So, what's actually going on? Modern researchers mostly chalk it up to mistaken identity. The region is home to some freaky birds, like the shoebill stork, a massive, gray, prehistoric-looking bird with a beak that could give you nightmares and wings that spread 8 feet. Sounds scary, but these birds have feathers, not scales, and none of them go around biting holes in boats. Other people suggest a giant bat, like the hammer-headed bat, but again, not a perfect match. The Kangamato is supposed to have a huge beak and be way bigger than any bat known to science. And yeah, some people, especially cryptozoologists, really want it to be a leftover pterosaur. The idea that a Jurassic Park reject is still gliding through African swamps is too tempting for cryptid hunters to give up. But bottom line, no skeletons, no verified sightings, and scientists aren't buying it. So next time you're canoeing through a Zambian swamp and the sun starts setting, maybe keep your eyes up and hope you don't see anything with leathery wings. Oh, and I've got another flying cryptid that loves causing chaos, but this time it's not a pterodactyl. It's something else entirely. Ahul. Alright, let's go deep into the jungle for this one. It's night in the rainforests of Java, and somewhere above you, something enormous just glided past the moon. That's when you hear it. 3 loud, bone-chilling cries. This is Ahul, Indonesia's most disturbing, oversized, human-faced bat. Let's get a good look at this nightmare. The Ahul is supposed to be a mix between a bat and, weirdly enough, a monkey. Imagine a toddler-sized bat-monkey hybrid with short gray fur and leathery wings stretching 12 feet across. That's twice the wingspan of the biggest bat you'll find anywhere else. And this isn't your basic bat face either. The Ahul's got these big, sad, almost human eyes, a flattened nose, a jaw that looks more primate than predator. Its feet point backwards when it's hanging in the trees. Creepy, but that's actually something real bats do. The locals swear it flies silently, then drops down to snatch fish out of rivers with its claws. Sometimes people claim it goes after small animals, or, every once in a while, even people. The story really took off back in the 1920s, when Dr. Ernst Bartels, a respected naturalist, started hanging out in Java's wild valleys. In 1925, he spotted something huge flapping over a waterfall, but it disappeared before he could get a good look. 2 years later, while he was trying to sleep, the silence exploded with that Ahul cry echoing above his hut. Bartels jumped out of bed, flashlight in hand, but whatever made that noise was already gone. He knew every animal in those woods, and this wasn't any of them. His report became the Ahul's claim to cryptid fame. Over time, other villagers started telling their own stories. Shadows gliding through the moonlight, trees shaking as something massive took off, or just the weird spine-tingling cries in the dark. So, do we have proof? Not really. Just Bartel's story, plus a bunch of locals who swear by the legend. There are no bones, no photos, no giant bat wing nailed to someone's wall. In most cases, people see a big shadow or hear the call, and their imagination does the rest. Scientists have pointed out that the jungle's dark, your mind's racing, and a regular-sized animal suddenly looks way bigger than it really is. Plus, Bartel's an ear witness account. He only heard the cry, never the creature. It means this could be a classic case of mistaken identity. If you ever want a rational answer, here's the best guess. It's probably an owl. The Javan wood owl has a big wingspan, flat monkey-like face, and a super loud cry that actually sounds kind of like ahoo. If you get buzzed by an angry owl at midnight, your mind's going to fill in the gaps with something monstrous. The wings are silent, the eyes glow red in the dark, and if you're really unlucky, it'll even dive bomb you to protect its nest. That could explain a lot of the stories, except for, the whole 12-foot wingspan thing. Some cryptozoologists like Carl Schuker think it could be a mystery bat, maybe even a new species that science just hasn't caught up with yet. But bats this big would be impossible to miss, and they sure wouldn't be sneaking around for decades without anyone snapping a photo. The Ahul is what you get when local fear meets jungle noise and imagination does the rest. No creatures, no bones, but the stories won't shut up. Maybe there's something out there, still waiting to be discovered. Loveland Frog. Alright, imagine this. You're driving down a dark, half-empty road just outside Loveland, Ohio. It's late, you're tired. Suddenly, something jumps out from the weeds. You slow down, you rub your eyes, and there it is. A 4-foot-tall frog standing on 2 legs. Just chilling by the guardrail like it's waiting for the bus. This is the legend of the Loveland Frog, or as the locals call it, the Frogman. If you've never heard the story, you're probably thinking, wait, so a frog walks like a human, and it's the size of a kid? Yeah, that's the whole point. Witnesses all agree it's not a regular frog. It stands upright, has scaly, leathery skin, and usually a slimy shade of green or gray. The face is all frog, with big bulging eyes, a wide mouth, and sometimes those weird fleshy ridges or fake horns on top. Its fingers and toes are webbed, and it walks around with a stubby torso and, depending on the sighting, no real tail. Basically, if a giant toad started cosplaying as Bigfoot, this is what you'd get. The whole thing starts way back in 1955. There's this traveling salesman cruising through Loveland late at night. He claims he sees not one, but 3 of these things. They're squatting by the side of the road, frog faces, spiny backs, just standing there like it's beer night. Oh, and one's waving around a spark-shooting wand, because apparently being a mutant amphibian wasn't weird enough. Nobody even really checks out this story, and it mostly just sits in the rumor bin. Then you get to 1972, and things get wild. Officer Ray Shockey, Loveland Police, says he's driving near the boot factory at 1 in the morning. He sees a frog-shaped, child-sized animal crouched by the curb. He stops. The thing stands up on 2 legs, then vaults over the guardrail. 2 weeks later, another cop, Mark Matthews, finds the same thing, except this time he's not taking chances. Matthews shoots it. When he checks the body, surprise, he says it's just a massive iguana, like 3 feet long, tail missing, probably half frozen. He takes it to Shockey and they both shrug. End of story, right? Nope. The iguana detail somehow gets lost in the retelling, and suddenly, Loveland Frogman is all over Ohio. Everyone's cousin knows a guy who saw it. Artists are drawing their own versions, and by the 2010s, the legend just won't die. In 2016, a couple playing Pokemon Go claims they got video proof. Local news runs with it. Internet goes nuts. Experts step in, take one look, and it turns out, yeah, that's a plastic lawn ornament floating in the creek. Every time someone tries to nail this thing down, reality ruins the party. Officer Matthews, yep, the original shooter, comes out in interviews and just flat out says it. Not a cryptid, not a monster. Just a sickly iguana. He even explains how the local pet trade means iguanas escape all the time. And maybe this one just lucked out in the warm runoff from a nearby factory. Skeptics also suggest maybe it was a deer or someone's imagination. That should have killed the legend. But instead, the story took on a life of its own. There's never been a real photo, not a single footprint, and definitely no body. Just stories, old police notes, and a city that now parades a frogman mascot at festivals like it's totally normal. You'd think that debunking would kill the hype, but honestly, the Loveland Frog just gets weirder. People write musicals about it, chase fake videos, and hunt for frogmen every summer. At this point, it's more of a regional in-joke than a real cryptid hunt. So next time you're driving through Loveland and see something lumpy leap over a guardrail, relax. It's probably just a plastic frog. Or, you know, an iguana. Calanoro, Madagascar cave or forest spirit. The Calanoro is a creature from the deep forests and caves of Madagascar, one of those rare cryptids whose roots run much older than the internet. In the stories, the Calanoro are tiny, hairy people, usually less than a meter tall, with wild, tangled hair covering their whole bodies. They have extra long fingernails, sharp claws, and their feet are famously backward, meaning the heels point forward and the toes point back. This detail shows up again and again in village tales, and is supposed to make them very tricky to track in the wild. People say they only have 3 clawed toes, and when the light is low, their eyes glow red in the darkness. Some locals describe Calanoro as looking like little hairy men or women sitting near cave fires, with long beards for males and long hair for both. And it's not just about how they look. Some stories say the females love to swim, splashing through rivers during the rainy season. They're also linked to magic. Calanoro can supposedly pass on healing secrets or taboos to humans, and some villagers will call on them through a medium for help with illness, fertility, or missing children. Their voices, if you hear them through a medium, sound high and childlike. In other stories, they play a darker role. Sometimes they snatch children, curse villages, or act as spirits of the dead. A lot of Malagasy people connect them to the Vazimba, the legendary first people of Madagascar, believing that the Calanoro are either their ghosts or related to them somehow. The idea of the Calanoro isn't something new. Anthropologists and explorers have been writing about them for over 100 years. Back in 1886, a British traveler described villagers who talked about a wild man, small and hairy, that sometimes warmed itself by their fires. There's even an old story of explorers supposedly catching a Calanoro, but historians checked and couldn't find any real proof. Most reports like that are now seen as tall tales. So where did this legend come from? Some scientists think the Calanoro myth may be a memory of extinct animals. Madagascar once had big ground-dwelling lemurs that looked a bit like furry little people, and maybe villagers, centuries later, remembered them as spirits in the forest. Others say the Kalanoro legend is part of a bigger pattern. Many cultures around the world have stories of small, hairy wildfolk hiding in the woods. There's also the possibility that the word Kalanoro comes from old local languages, or from German, meaning something like fast ghost. But even with all these ideas, nobody has ever found a Kalanoro bone, body, or real scientific evidence. Today, the Kalanoro is still very much a part of Malagasy culture. Most reports are secondhand or come from rituals and ceremonies, not from anyone actually seeing a Kalanoro up close. Anthropologists studying the island write about how the Kalanoro shapes village life. If a child goes missing or a crop fails, some people say it was the work of a Kalanoro, and rituals may be held to make peace. Farmers sometimes avoid cutting down trees or hunting in places said to be Kalanoro territory. In this way, the legend helps protect certain parts of the forest, acting almost like a guardian spirit that keeps humans from overusing the land. Tier 4. Internet Era Entity. Mountain creature caught running behind Google's Street View car, or MOCC. A Google Street View car bumps along a quiet mountain road in British Columbia, snapping pictures for maps. It's just another day of endless trees, rocks, and winding pavement. But then, in a single blurry frame from 2018, something shows up behind the car. Something weird. Something that definitely doesn't look like a tree. If you zoom in, all you get is a fuzzy brown blob, lurking off the shoulder of Duffy Lake Road. But internet imaginations have a way of running wild. Pretty soon, artists and Reddit sleuths decided they were looking at a short, chunky creature about 3 or 4 feet tall, with smooth, light skin, no visible arms, and a long tubular body that looks like it belongs on a giant salamander or newt. Some people draw MOCC with a wide, frog-like mouth and round, staring eyes. Others add ridged spines down its back, or make it squat like a little dinosaur. Everyone agrees on one thing. It's armless, awkward, and definitely not a bear. In other words, nobody really knows what MOCC is supposed to be. The original image is so blurry it could be almost anything. An upended tree root, a hunched-over animal, or maybe just a muddy rock. But once the fan art started rolling in, MOCC became a lizard-like biped, a new cryptid for the digital age. The entire legend began in 2018, when a Reddit user posted the Google Street View image and asked, "What is that thing running behind the car?" Within days, Twitter and cryptid blogs exploded with theories and memes. MOCC instantly became a cryptid with its own nickname, a running joke on TikTok, and a canvas for digital artists. If you want to see the original scene, you can still find the spot by plugging 50, 19, 10 north, and 122, 33, 45 west into Google Maps, and scrolling back to the 2018 image set. Unlike almost every other cryptid out there, MOCC has no previous sightings, no centuries-old folklore, and no creepy bedtime stories. It's a creature that was born, lived, and mutated entirely in the fast-moving world of social media. It's not a local legend, just an internet meme that got out of hand. So what could it be? Let's be real, the Google photo is so pixelated, you could make a case for almost anything. Some people say it looks like a fallen log, or a beaver just out of the water. Others think it's an old tree stump, a bush at a weird angle, or a trick of the camera as the car zipped past. There's even a theory that the creature is actually part of a static object, with motion blur making it look alive as the camera car moves. The effect is called parallax, and it's a pretty common glitch in fast-moving panoramic images. So is there any other evidence? Short answer, nope. There's no clear video, no second sighting, no locals claiming to have seen a mountain lizard-like person wandering in the woods. All we have is a single blurry Google Street View photo, plus tons of jokes, stickers, and digital artwork. Some TikTok and YouTube videos retell the story, but they're just using the original image or fan art. Nobody has turned up any tracks, shed skin, or nighttime screeches that can't be explained by frogs, beavers, or the usual Canadian wildlife. Even cryptozoologists don't take MOCC very seriously. The story is too new, too tied to a single image, and way too meme-driven to count as a real legend. Ningen. The Ningen is a giant sea creature that comes straight from internet age legend. According to people who claim to have seen it, the Ningen is a huge pale humanoid, sometimes up to 20 or even 30 meters long, lurking in the cold waters near Antarctica. Most stories say it has smooth, milky white skin, and its body looks almost human if you squint. A torso, 2 arms, 2 legs, and sometimes even hands with 5 fingers. The head is usually round and simple, with tiny eyes and a slit for a mouth. No nose, no real face. Some versions say that the ningen has more tentacle-like arms, or a body that looks more like a blobby seal. But the main thing is, it's enormous and extremely pale. Pretty much all the reported photos and videos of the ningen are blurry, dark, or so vague you could be looking at a whale, an iceberg, or even a patch of ice in weird light. There are no clear pictures, and nobody has ever captured a ningen or found a body. Even the best proof online is usually just a shadowy shape underwater or a white lump sticking out of the sea. Sometimes someone posts a Google Earth image that's supposed to show a ningen near Antarctica, but every time, experts or curious fans point out it's just a chunk of ice or a digital glitch. What makes the ningen different from older sea monster tales is that it's a completely modern story. The first sightings only appeared online in the mid-2000s. Japanese internet forums like 2channel were full of anonymous posts claiming that whalers or government research ships had seen a mysterious white creature in the Southern Ocean. In the most famous version, a whaling crew saw something so big they first thought it was a submarine, then realized it was a pale, human-like creature floating just beneath the surface. The ningen legend really took off after a 2007 article in Japan's Mew magazine, which covered strange creatures and paranormal stuff. They ran the story and printed out a supposed satellite image of a white thing in the ocean, supposedly a ningen, but probably just a bad photo or a joke. After that, the idea went viral online, with people swapping sightings, sharing creepy art, and making YouTube videos or blog posts about the Antarctic humanoid. Scientists and skeptics have weighed in on the ningen, but not in a flattering way. All serious researchers says there's no evidence for any real creature. Biologists point out that there are albino whales, seals, and big jellyfish in southern waters, any of which could look spooky from a distance or at night. Icebergs, especially ones that roll or break, can take weird shapes, and if you're out at sea for weeks, you might start to see faces and arms where there are none. This trick of the mind is called pareidolia, and it explains why people spot eyes or human features in clouds, wood grain, or ice. A few more creative explanations have popped up too. Some people say that the ningen is a symbol of Japan's uneasy feelings about its whaling program, sort of a modern sea ghost, invented to haunt ships in an age when whaling is controversial. But the bottom line is, there's no real evidence. Every photo, every video, every supposed leak is either a misidentified animal, a floating chunk of ice, or just straight up internet storytelling. Despite this, the ningen has become a small pop culture star. The creature shows up in manga, horror comics, YouTube documentaries, and plenty of blog posts. Cryptid fans have made it part of the online pantheon, right alongside Bigfoot and Nessie, but with a colder and more ghostly vibe. Goatman. If you've ever driven down a lonely back road at night and suddenly gotten the urge to roll up your windows, maybe you need to lock the doors because you're not alone. If you're anywhere near Prince George's County, Maryland, there's a good reason for that. People around here have been swapping stories for decades about the Goatman. Let's set the scene. The Goatman is a nightmare mashup, a 7-foot-tall monster, body like a linebacker covered in wiry, dark fur, legs ending in cloven hooves, and a head that's part man, part goat, with thick horns curling up from its skull. Some people say its face is basically a man with a beard and slitted pupils. Others go with a full goat face with an elongated snout and all. Either way, it's not something you want to meet in the woods. And then there's the axe. Yeah, an axe. A lot of Maryland tales have the Goatman lurking around with a hatchet, supposedly left over from a backstory involving mad scientists and lab escapes. But the thing people remember most is the sound. Supposedly, the Goatman's shriek is this blood-curdling mix of a human scream and a goat's dying wail. Witnesses say it echoes through the trees just before the thing shows up, almost like it's warning you, or maybe just messing with you for fun. It's territorial, it's aggressive, and according to more than a few local teens from the 70s, it doesn't mind chasing cars or smashing windshields if you get too close. Got a pet in the neighborhood that disappeared? The legend probably blames Goatman for that too. Of course, Goatman isn't just a Maryland thing. There's the Pope Lick monster in Kentucky that supposedly haunts a train trestle and lures people onto the tracks. Texas has its own version lurking around the old Alton Bridge. Different details, same basic aura. Half man, half goat, and a reputation for terrorizing anyone who gets brave or stupid enough to look for it. The Maryland version really exploded in the early 70s, right after a family dog turned up dead and decapitated not far from Fletchertown Road. The media jumped all over it. Stories about a hairy, axe-wielding creature started popping up everywhere. Teens dared each other to hunt Goatman at the infamous Crybaby Bridge. and just about every unexplained scratch on a car or a strange noise in the dark got chalked up to the monster. There are a bunch of origin stories. The most famous one says the goat man was created in a genetics lab gone wrong, with a scientist either transforming himself or accidentally making a goat-human hybrid that escaped into the woods, never to be caught. Another version has him as a deranged hermit, some unlucky goat farmer who went mad and started attacking trespassers. And if you go way back, there are even echoes of old myths like satyrs, fauns, and demons, the kind of stuff you definitely don't want following you home. But if you're hoping for real proof, you're out of luck. No bones, no fur, no blurry photos worth a second look. What we have are stories. Teens claiming to see glowing eyes in the brush, couples being chased on lovers' lanes, and a lot of pet owners with scary campfire tales. Most researchers chalk it up to misidentifications, pranks, or just the power of a good story in a small town. Still, every so often, Goatman fever made a comeback, usually after some new sighting, or just because people want to test their nerve at a haunted bridge. It's become a rite of passage for local kids and a favorite for TV specials and Halloween attractions. You won't find the Goatman in any biology book, but if you ask around Prince George's County, someone's bound to have a cousin or a friend of a friend who swears they've seen him. So yeah, that's the bottom of this iceberg. No proof, just stories, sightings, weird footprints that go nowhere. Doesn't matter if it's swamp dragons, giant bats, or some goat-headed guy screaming in the woods, every place has its monster. And somehow, nobody ever finds the body. The real question isn't what's out there. It's why we keep hoping something is. Keep the lights on. And maybe skip the shortcut through the woods tonight.